we're having some difficulties here marking forms in. As you know, people, there's always orange barrels keeping people to go from A to Z. And I think Commissioner Wheeler is on his way, very close. Am I correct, Mark?
That would be correct. Madam Chair.
Yes.
We are ready on our end. I don't know if you want to wait for Commissioner Wheeler, or if you want to go ahead and begin.
Okay, we'll get, the approval for the minutes and all that out of the way, and I'm Judy Blackburn, and I'm the chairman of the State Election Commission, and I would like to welcome everybody here. And I'm calling this meeting to order. And first on the agenda is to approve the minutes for April 5th, 19th, April the 27th, May the 11th, and May the 26th. The last four were telephonic meetings, and that is to appoint county election commissioners only. Has everybody looked over the minutes? I think everybody got that email before today. Do I hear a motion?
Motion to approve the minutes. Carter.
All in favor? Next on the agenda is the county election commission appointments. Do I hear a motion to hold this open till the end of the day today, please?
Motion.
Second. All in favor? Okay. Old business, none. And the new business is show cause hearing of the Benton County Administrator of Elections, Mark Ward. I'm gonna back up. I'd like to introduce everybody to the State Election Commission. On the end, we have Commissioner Barrett, Commissioner Duckett, Commissioner Young, Commissioner McDonald, Commissioner Wheeler, and our new State Election Commissioner, Jimmy Eldridge. Welcome, Jimmy. I apologize for not doing that this morning. Okay. Are we ready?
Ready.
Okay.
Can work there as well?
It's working.
All right, thank you. So we are here today for the show cause hearing on Mark Ward. My name is Mark Owens, Coordinator of Elections for the state of Tennessee. Great state of Tennessee. And essentially, if Mr. Ward's certification is revoked today, it will affect his salary. He makes approximately $70,000 as Administrator of Elections. There's a state supplement that goes to the county from the state. And if the certification is revoked, the state supplement will no longer go. And by statute, the Election Commission, local election commission, will be able to set Mr. Ward's salary at whatever rate they'd like to set it at. Duty of the Administrator of Elections. The Administrator of Elections has the duty to have knowledge of all current laws pertaining to the election process and any changes mandated by the General Assembly. This is important, and this is what you're going to see, and you're going to hear this with your own words. So he has a duty to have the knowledge, and he has a duty to apprise the Election Commission, and in his own meeting, you're going to see how he's apprised his Election Commission. He has the duty to tell his staff what the laws are, candidates, the press. You're going to see some quotes from some press. In fact, you all have seen the Camden article and show cause hearing documents that we provided to Mr. Wood prior to this. And you will also see public information that he has sent out in the videos that we also made of record in the show cause documents. If you were to look at the election code and the Tennessee Constitution, the ultimate duty and the real reason the laws are there is really to prevent voter fraud. And so performing your duties, you are educating and preventing as best you can voter fraud from entering the system. There's another goal as well, and that goal is to prevent disenfranchisement of eligible voters and also ensure fairness. In a nutshell, that's the ultimate duty of the administrative elections. The statutory guideline for us being here today is in addition to the penalties set forth in A18B, and those penalties apply if the administrator does not attend training that's mandated under state law. Independent of the State Election Commission, an administrator fails to substantially perform the duties of the office, the State Election Commission may revoke the certification of such administrator or otherwise discipline the administrator. Today, you're going to learn from staff, and by the way, staff that will be doing the presentation, Andrew Dodd is an attorney in the office, and Beth Henry Robertson, who is the Assistant Coordinator of Elections for this great state of Tennessee. Both of them will be doing part of the presentations today during our case. After we present our case, you'll get a chance to hear from Dr. Shannon on behalf of Mr. Ward. There will be a rebuttal from us, a rebuttal from them, and then there will be a closing today. So anyway, basically, you're going to see and hear from the video, Mr. Ward, in his own words, create a cloud of suspicion around the local election commission members and make it look like the state election commission members have done something improper. But all y'all did was follow the law. You'll see that Mark Ward disenfranchised eligible voters. He failed to do his duty in making sure those two voters, at least two voters, one in the August election, one in the November election, that their votes were counted. You're going to see evidence today that Mark Ward failed to do his duty by appearing at a county commission meeting in his official capacity and state opposition to an issue that could be on the ballot. What's unique about this case is you're going to hear his own words. This isn't going to be hearsay. You're actually going to hear Mark Ward's own words. You're going to also see that Mark Ward failed to do his duty when processing voter registrations. He didn't do it efficiently. And let me tell you, on the second point there, this is very important. Other counties rely on Mr. Ward to do his job. When he processes a voter registration and sends it to the state, what the state does, we forward it to the county that that individual was registered in, if in fact they were registered in another county in the state of Tennessee. We've had numerous city elections already this year. The ramifications of waiting to process a voter registration means that county don't get that notice. That county don't know that they need to purge them. So if that voter were to go to the voter lookup, they're still going to see that they're registered in that county. For example, Crockett County had an election not too long ago. 4 votes separated one of the elections there. But it's not just for city mayor or city council that we've had close elections. We had a U.S. congressional seat, 4th congressional district, Scott Edgerly, Jim Tracy, decided on less than 40 votes. In Anderson County, we had a judicial race, 15,000 people voted, and it was a tie. So just one ineligible voter can make a difference in an election. You're going to see that Mark Ward failed to do his duty to ensure bipartisan poll official representation. He failed to apprise the Benton County Election Commission that a separate absentee county board was needed to count the absentee ballots. So the mail-in ballots that were counted in August and November 2020, they were counted inappropriately. I'm going to take the county election commission appointments first, because this is something that I know, because I was a former state election commission member, and I know that the way that Mr. Ward has described the process is not the process. In fact, all you got to do is look at state law. If you look at state law, before appointing county election commissioners, the members of the state election commission shall consult with the members of the General Assembly serving each of the counties as the persons to be appointed to the county election commissions. So what does state law require? State law requires that the state election commission consult with the legislative delegation from that area. Jessica. What I have here is a letter from Representative Bruce Griffin, who did make the recommendation. No, Jessica here. Who did make the recommendation, and he recommended that the current members be retained. Just that one, and this one. And here's a recommendation from John Stevens, the state senator from that area. His recommendation for Russell Ragsdale, Debbie Kyle, and Janet Higdon. Summers has a copy of this for the record to be entered in for the State Election Commission meetings. So in other words, Senator Stevens and Representative Griffith were consulted with. The process was followed under state law. There's no question about that. Now, if you notice the language, it says shall consult. It doesn't mean you have to take the appointments of the members. And one of the reasons that comes into play is sometimes you do have a state senator or state representative that do not agree. We've had that happen many times. At some point, you have to make a decision. The code allows you to do so. Now, important as we go through this, and as you hear Mr. Ward's words, I want you to understand that Representative Griffey is an elected leader. He will be on the ballot next time. Senator Stevens, well, I'll see if he runs. Senator Stevens is an elected leader. I want you to listen to Mark Ward's words as we go through this, as he castigates and puts doubt on the entire system for the entire state of Tennessee. Now, once again, I just want to reiterate, Mark Ward, it's his responsibility to know what the laws are, and it's his responsibility to tell the press, the public, as well as the Election Commission, what the law is. Here's a meeting on April 17, 2021. This is a public meeting. Many counties from West Tennessee had gotten there. It appears to me that the purpose of this meeting was to build support for Mr. Ward. In fact, you'll hear Mr. Ward tell people to support him in one of the videos. So here's Mark Ward's own words.
As one county goes, what appointments to the county election commissions are, the local parties, Democrat and Republicans, were not allowed to give their names. They gave their names to the planning commission. So, why would they do that? Why would they take a name from the local people, the local parties? Why are they going around that situation in Big County? They haven't done that in any other counties. As a matter of fact,
So, very clearly, what he says is they're going around what they're supposed to be doing. I just shared with you, just put in the record, they follow state law, but they haven't done this in any other county. Mark Ward's own words is saying that y'all did something improper. It gets worse.
they replaced two of the Republicans, drafted a good administrator, and two Democrats and one Republicans in the meeting.
Well, what you're saying, they're totally going around the way election commissioners are appointed to the board.
That's just started in the last couple of years, and it's not right. The local people know the people who live in their county. They know they're Republican.
This has been a tyrant form of government.
That's the way I see it.
So y'all follow the law, but he sees it as a form of tyrant form of government. It's not the only time you're going to see this comment. So he's telling the public, multiple counties, that you all are tyrants, essentially. If you were to sum it up, that's what he's saying. For following the law.
Yeah, it's happening all across, and there has to be a reason for that. And my question is, there's a reason for that, but why are they trying to get rid of the people who are bucking their little system and going against what they're saying? You know what I mean? That's the bigger reason. There's a bigger reason. I don't care about my job. I'm not an administrative elections for a job. I make my money through my property and real estate. 10 times probably more than I make on that job. And that's the reason I don't mind sticking up. You got 94 other administrators there to meet.
So two things from that video right there. One thing, as you know, in the show cause hearing, one of the employees was told that Mr. Ward hadn't performed his duties because he was working with his real estate. There he says he makes 10 times what he makes as administrator. He makes $70,000 as administrator, which would mean that he's making $700,000 a year in real estate. If anybody's ever been involved in real estate, and I have been, that takes a lot of time. But anyway, there he is. He's asking the question, planting the seed. Something's going on here. What's going on? They followed the law, but in his mind, y'all went around the system because you didn't take a recommendation from the Republican Party chairman of Benton County.
I have to answer this question. The state election commission has been totally corrupted. And I hate to say that, but very state things have been totally corrupted.
I'm asking the question. Y'all help me find out what's going on in the state election.
All you got to do is listen to what they're doing. Yeah, but the Benton County Election Commission is probably one of the best in the state. Here they turn it upside down and try to these people that's bad. Well, the bad ones are the state election commission.
Yeah, but there's something right there. Go back just a few seconds. This is very important. Once again, the subject is the appointment process, what was legally complied with the State Election Commission. But when former Representative James Peace says the bad ones are the ones that's on the State Election Commission, I want you to watch Mr. Ward's reaction as he shakes his head affirmatively.
Don't turn it upside down and try to get the people that's bad. Well, the bad ones are the State Election Commission. Jimmy Wallace, I have to get him on the State Election Commission. He's worthless now. Hate to say that.
Amen.
But he's worthless.
Go back, we're back to Robert here. We're, having this, county election reorganization Thursday, next Thursday, the 22nd, 5 o'clock in Big County. I'm asking everybody that can come out and show support tomorrow. That's all I'm asking, just to say.
Now let's be clear what's happened here. He is saying y'all are bad because you took a state senator's recommendation, which is exactly what state law allows you to do. Here's what he says in the local newspaper. Tell the local newspaper that for the past 50 years, in every county across the state, county election board members have been chosen by their local political party's executive leadership. I know that's not true because I was a legislator, and that's not what I did. Mr. Eldridge, I know you just recently got on the election commission, so you've not been going through this process, but as a representative, as a state representative, when these appointments were being made, did you consult with the local political party, the Republican Party? Are they the ones who chose who went on the election commission for Madison County?
I've always consulted with the elected officials that represent that particular area, and also we talked to Jimmy Wallace, who was on the State Election Commission, and got advice and recommendation from them.
So that is the state law. I mean, the state law is you consult as a legislator. You didn't have to consult with the political party. You didn't. And you were represented for 14, 16 years. And I don't have to go through every election commissioner out there because y'all know that's just false. I mean, frankly, I'd like to sugarcoat it, but that's a lie. And we all know that's a lie. He goes on to say, and this is important because the process in Tennessee law, the Tennessee General Assembly has established, is that elected leaders who do appear on the ballot do have the authority under the statute to make recommendations. But here's his quote in the Camden Chronicle. There is a reason elected politicians should not have influence over the county elections. If someone owed their appointment or job to an elected person who was asking them to do something unethical or illegal, well, would they stick to the law and say no? Or would they yield to the pressure to keep their appointment and cooperate? I want you to listen. In a moment, you're going to hear a video where he talks about Senator Stevens. And essentially, his words are, because Senator Stevens made this recommendation, it clouds the whole process. That's what happens all across the entire state. He finishes once again with that tyranny word. It says, let your voice be heard. Take action. We cannot allow tyranny to prevail. Once again, this is Mark Ward's words. I did contact Angela Jones as a reporter there because obviously he told them a lie. And so I contacted the reporter just to make sure that is what he said, and they agreed that was his words. Here we are in the Benton County Election Commission meeting. And you're going to feel sorry in a moment for the duly appointed local election commissioners. You'll see the harassment that they have taken because of the words that Mr. Ward has put out there, essentially putting a cloud over their appointment.
I'm not insinuating that. I'm just saying he's really, or whoever asked that question is really, your name got submitted. Did it go through the Republican Party of Benton County? That's what I'm saying. That's the question they're asking. Because historically, in every state, in every county in the state of Tennessee, your Democrat Party gives 2 names for the election commission, and your Republican Party gives 3. They want that for a reason. They want local control of your election commission. The local people then that are on that board, they hire an administrator. That's for a reason, so you won't be obligated to someone who's on the ballot. And the way, and I'm trying to explain this the best way I can, the way these 3, and I don't have anything against them, we've been friends my whole life, I've known all of you. I've worked with Janet and Debbie on a bunch of different things, and I'm not saying against them, I'm saying the process did not go through your local parties.
to put this forward on. So if it goes to your county mayor and your state senator, it's not the process that everyone else uses. If it's going around the process, these people could have undue pressure put on them from Mayor Lashley, from Senator Stevens, since he's the one that caused their appointment. That's all I was saying. We need to stay above board, above reproach. And if it's not the process, I mean, how do y'all feel about the process? Do y'all not feel that we're doing it different than every county in the state for one time, for one reason?
I don't have any clue what the other parties do or other counties do. To me, it's irrelevant because no one asked me to do anything when Ms. Barrett called and asked me, would I serve? I don't have a clue where that the name came from, so therefore I don't feel any pressure.
Yeah, I'm not saying that. I'm saying about the way you're
So
doing
the
it.
process worked as far as that goes, and I can't tell you what anything beyond that, but just for myself. There's no pressure. Nobody's asked me to do anything.
For 14 years, I've been involved in the elections. I got involved in 2007 when I became a county commissioner, where you're set, election commissioner, where you're set today. The process was that way in 2007. The Democrats were in control. I was in the minority. And the process has been that way ever since. And it's so you're not obligated. I'm saying what we're doing here today, and y'all are being on this board, it just gives me a bad feeling going forward, not because of you or your personalities or your ethics or anything, just because of the perception that, how many people do you see out here today? The perception that they have of how their election commission is going to be.
So he's created the perception that the new commissioners, they're obligated. Who are they obligated to? Senator Stevens. Under the law, who's allowed to give appointment suggestions to you all? Senator Stevens. He not only told the election commission members that, he told the newspaper that, he told the public that, so he failed in all three rounds when you're looking at his duty to communicate. So how was it perceived by the election commissioners? And two of those election commissioners are here today. How did they perceive this? What was going on?
That when it filed a change report in 10 days of us being appointed. I was offended when I read the paper saying that we were illegally appointed, implying that I was dishonest. I have never, since I've been involved in politics, been accused of being dishonest, immoral, or a tyrant, or acting or being led by my nose. Never. I do not compromise my principles for anybody, and I'm not going to be intimidated, harassed, vindicated, or threatened by anyone, no matter what party they are affiliated with. Do you realize that the public outcry on social media saying there's going to be a blowout in the courthouse, an explosion, calling out for everyone to come, bring your lawn chairs. I want you to look at how many deputies that we have here, how many state troopers that we have here, because of retaliation and threatening and wanting to harass this process. So much that we have two Democrats.
So that's Chairman Debbie Kyle. That's Chairman Debbie Kyle of the Local Election Commission. So you can see the perception, the cloud that's been placed by the misinterpretation, the lie about the law. In fact, here's a citizen. How did he perceive what Mr. Ward was saying?
School, graduated Mark, I'm all my life. He is a Christian man. His integrity is questionable. I'd like to say the same about the whole process taken in your positions. I'm not a man of many words, I'm just going to say that because of suspicion surrounding your own appointment, if you do what is right, after all the testimonies been given, all the facts have been presented, if you do what's right, and remove the doubt about your own appointments, you'll be dismissed. Mark.
And what's telling about this meeting right here? What's telling about this meeting right here? I'd gotten word that Mr. Ward was saying the improper presentation. I mean, improper interpretation of the law, what was actually going on. And so I sent him a letter. So he spoke on April the 17th. I sent him a letter sharing with him that what he was saying was improper. He admits in the meeting that he got the letter, but he continued to lie to the public. And did they rely on his lie? You heard that gentleman speak right there. Did the press rely? They printed what he said. Jessica, if you'll pass this, if you'll make sure, I know that Mr. Ward had this letter, but we can make sure that Randy Shannon, Dr. Randy Shannon over there has a copy, since we are entering in the record. And so let's talk about conflicts. Matthew Jones is the chairman of the Benton County Republican Party. And all the fuss is going off really about his recommendation. He recommended Chairman Jim Austin, Sue Raw, and Ben Thompson. And they're saying there's this huge conflict going on, but they're saying the conflict, the tyrants, the folks that have the cloud of suspicion are either these local election commissioners or either the state election commission. So this is important. I want you to see the real conflict. And if I have the relationship improper, I'm sure Dr. Shannon can correct me, but Chairman Matt Jones, the person who recommended the list to Representative Griffey, he's the first cousin to Mark Ward's wife. In other words, Mark Ward's wife's mother is Chairman Jones's mother's sister, as I've been told. In turn, Matt Jones' brother is the Deputy Benton County Administrator of Elections. He's hired by Mark Ward. Now, I will say this about Scott. Scott, we find him to be a good employee. We think that he has a role to play in county government. We don't think he has a role to play with his relative supervising him. Matt Jones is one of the highest paid poll officials in Benton County. The average poll official makes $75 per election, $225 for a year. Matt Jones makes $200 per election, $600 for the year. Other family members are paid as much as $300 for the November election. In fact, we noticed that there's 4 election workers that's related to the family there that make $950. It takes 12 normal poll officials to get to $900. So 12 workers don't even equal 4 if you're in that family. These are based off the November 2020 payroll sheets. Jessica, if you'll give the payroll sheets to Dr. Shannon. So yeah, there's a conflict, but the conflict's not with the State Election Commission. The State Election Commission followed the law. The problem is Mr. Ward went out and told everyone that y'all did something improper. And unfortunately has cast doubt on the legally, properly appointed election commission. There is no doubt Mark Ward failed in his duty to educate the press, the public, and the election commission. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Beth Henry Robertson as she discusses some other failures of Administrator Ward.
Good afternoon. You all have a packet that covers this failure to properly advise the Provisional County Board to count the legal ballots, and in that packet I have all of the information that I'm also going to be submitting into the record. Mr. Shannon has been given a copy of those documents as well. The purpose of provisional voting is to prevent illegal disenfranchisement of eligible voters who timely attempted to register to vote. Provisional voting is required by both federal and state law. Under federal law, if an individual declares he is or she is a registered voter in the jurisdiction but that person's name is not on the official rolls, under federal law that person is eligible and entitled to have a provisional ballot. The federal law goes on to say that if the local officials determine that that person did timely attempt to register to vote and is eligible, their ballot must be counted. Our state law mirrors the federal law and says if a person comes to the polling place and is not on the rolls, they are to be given a provisional ballot. our state law also says that if the election commission, after reviewing the NVRA records and their election commission records, finds that that person attempted to timely register to vote and they're eligible, their ballot is to count. Again, the statutory duty of our administrators are to advise the election officials, the provisional counting board, of these laws. In June of 2016, we had a training seminar, it's a statewide seminar. All of our administrators of elections are attending. Certified administrators have to sign a document saying that they have attended and heard the presentation. This is a copy of the handout that is in your packet. I've given a copy to Mr. Shannon. In this presentation, in this outline, and this is the outline that goes with the administrator. So they bring this outline with them. We have it in a packet and they bring it they keep it basically. It's a hard copy that they keep. But here we advise them that the provisional counting board is to count the ballots, provisional ballots by hand, once they confirm that the voter has timely attempted to register to vote and have cast the ballot in the correct precinct. The administrator is then obligated to process that voter registration, update that voter history, because that voter gets history in that election, and then to mail the voter registration card. This is just to show that in the presentation, we had a PowerPoint presentation, so we not only give the administrators the outlines for them to take home, but we also go over the outlines with them during the sessions. So this was a part of the presentation. This is the attendance record that Mr. Ward signed and he marked that he was in attendance at that session. So he got the documents, he got the outline, and he heard the presentation. January 14th, 2019, Mr. Ward came before this commission and said that he advises his county board not to count provisional ballots. He indicated he thought there had been a change in policy in the way that we handle provisional ballots. Coordinator Goins addressed his concerns at that meeting and advised him there had not been a change in policy, not since the law had been enacted. And he reviewed with him the process. If your county board confirms that the person tried to timely register to vote, they voted in the correct precinct, their ballot must be counted. After this meeting, we went and we looked at the provisional voter data of Mr. Ward in Benton County. And you will see the documents that you will see on this issue, they are marked confidential, and they are marked confidential because of federal law. Federal law does not allow us to disclose the agency from which individuals attempted to register to vote. Dr. Shannon, has agreed to keep this information confidential, so he also has the record, but it is a confidential document, and it is marked on the record. But as you can see, this agency record for the voter in November 6th of 2018, the second question, she's indicated that she would like to register to vote. This information was given to Mr. Ward at that time. You can see from her voter history that she did not have her ballot counted. She was registered to vote after the November election, and her ballot did not count in that election. Again, looking at the Federal Election Assistance Commission report, Mr. Ward reported that he did not count any provisional ballots. He reported that he had 3 that were cast, but none were counted. So again, the individual for whom he got documentation showing that she had timely attempted to register to vote, he did not count that ballot, but the county board was instructed not to count that ballot. The effect of not counting provisional ballots that are legally cast is this voter was illegally disenfranchised. This voter was deprived of having a legally cast ballot counted. Again, August 2nd, 2018, we have documentation from a state agency that a voter attempted to timely register to vote. The Y on the third column indicates yes, agreed to register to vote in office. The minutes of the Benton County Election Commission, who served as the county board illegally, they have less than 100 provisional ballots, they can serve as the county board. The minutes reflect that they discussed a provisional voter who had not attempted to timely register to vote. So they were given misinformation. And we can see that they did not count it. The minutes reflect that they did not count it, and the voter history of that voter reflects that that ballot did not count. Again, the effect of not counting this ballot is this voter was illegally disenfranchised, and again, deprived of having their legal ballot that was cast not counted. So the testimony that Mr. Ward gave before you all on January 14, 2019, by his own testimony, he admitted to disenfranchising 2 voters. The next information, I don't have handouts for this charge. We have the video. Again, Mark has used video to show Mr. Ward's own words and what he has done. In this one, we are showing a bias that he, as representing the Election Commission office, he goes before the county legislative body in Benton County and presents his information with a bias. Under the code, Tennessee Code 2-111, all of our election officials, before they begin their duties, have to take the oath of office. And the oath of office is to carry out the laws of this state, the laws of the United States, and our oath includes that we will faithfully and impartially discharge our duties. So Mr. Ward has the responsibility and the duty to impartially discharge his duties of the County Election Commission office. The November 18th, 2019 meeting before the county legislative body, Mr. Ward was there to advise the commission that there was a petition being circulated in response to a general obligation bond resolution that they had adopted. Here he introduces himself as being there in his official capacity.
Yes, because we official capacity as administrator of election first, I just want to let y'all know that I'm sure you all know already that there's a petition about the $6 million bond issue, and there's been over 1,500 names turned in already, and I think we're up to Wednesday to turn.
Mr. Ward identifies himself as being there in his official capacity. The next thing you'll hear is him telling the legislative body why he is against the general obligation bonds.
I'm not moving forward. I'm against it just because of the way the process was handled. I don't think.
That's the first time you hear him tell them he's against this bond. Second time.
You know, way back in there, I don't think that's a place that you'd want central dispatch and EMS. But I'm not against all these projects. I'm just against the way that they've been proposed.
Again, he's not advising them that he's against it because of anything related to the elections process. He's advising them that he's against it because of something they've done. Here you'll hear the chair of that legislative body recognize that partiality and that bias and ask him about it.
It's about people what you want to achieve.
I'm not religious about
But
that.
I'm just telling you, there's some politics is doing it in
No, the only reason I'm involved in this at all is because I'm on the election commission. I haven't even been to
I thought election
listen, I haven't even been to
I thought your job was election, not getting in the foot.
I'm not here for you. Let me finish what I'm saying. They have to go through the election commission to come up with a petition. We've done petitions. We did 3.
Who got the petition up?
So here Mr. Ward is telling the board that he's there, again, because he's the administrator of elections. But the bias that he has shown has caused the chair to comment on the partiality. And so we believe that that comment from the chair says it all on this charge. Thank you. I'll hand it over to Andrew.
We want to look next at some of the issues related to voter registration that were brought up in the introduction. First, the failure to timely process voter registrations. We've looked at some of the duties of the administrator throughout this, but another one of the duties is the duty to oversee the voter registration process. 2120 gives the administrator the ultimate determination whether someone's eligible to vote in their county after reviewing the answers to the questions on their voter registration forms and to declare that voter to be registered. Additionally, is 212-201 lists the duties of the administrator of elections. Maintenance of voter registration files is included as a part of the duties of the election administrator. Mark alluded to some of the purposes of voter registration at the outset, but again, we're trying to ensure only eligible voters are registered, looking to make sure that they've sworn under oath that they're citizens, that they're residents of the counties they're registering in, that they meet all the eligibility criteria. It helps us prevent double voting because, as Mark mentioned, this doesn't happen in a vacuum. When you register in one place, there's a notification to the place where you were registered previously, so they remove you from the voter registration rolls. And so it helps us prevent fraud when these registrations are timely processed. So how do we manage that on a statewide level? Counties are expected to transfer data daily, so the statewide voter registration database can be updated. So each county election commission, as they process their voter registration records, are expected to upload that data to us on a daily basis so our statewide database can be up to date. Once that data is uploaded, nightly comparisons are done for all the voter registrations between all the counties to make sure that every voter only has one registration. If we find that someone has moved and registered in a new county, notice is immediately sent to the prior county so that local election commission gets a notification the next day, this person is registered in a new county, they can come off your rolls now. And so that's an ongoing process, that's a daily process. It's one of the duties of the election administrator. It's something that we use to make sure voters are only registered in one place. We do a lot of different things with this voter registration data. One of the things we do is we provide a public voter registration lookup. So any voter can come to our website, look up their voter registration status, and then make sure they're registered where they live, that the registration's up to date, that they're ready to vote in any upcoming elections. Or we received a complaint from a voter regarding their registration in Benton County. They turned in our voter registration online, used our online voter registration system, and yet when they came to this website and put in their information, they were told no records been found. Please contact someone about figuring out what's going on. And so when someone makes a complaint like that to our office, we want to look at several things. First, we want to make sure this website's working properly. When we checked on the website was working properly. Where they said they had registered online, Steve Griffey, who oversees our voter registration database, wanted to make sure that Benton County had access to their online voter registration transactions. Those are sent to counties on a daily basis through what's submitted on our website. And as it turns out, starting the week after, shortly after the election, after Benton County completed the voter history process, there were online voter registrations coming in on a regular basis. In about a 9-week period between November 11th and January the 14th, there were 31 days where users came to our site and entered some sort of online voter registration transaction that was then transferred down to Benton County. And looking back at that data, 7 of those were voters who were registered in other jurisdictions in Tennessee. So as soon as they would be added to the rolls in Benton County, their prior county would receive a notice that they needed to come off. So it wasn't that no one was using online voter registration. And so Steve began to look deeper to make sure that they were downloading their online voter registration files, that there didn't look like there was an error in that process. And sure enough, the folders where they were supposed to grab those files were empty, and it looked like those files were being completed on a daily basis. And so Steve then began looking at the transfer process. And what he saw was there were transfers being done on a regular basis, but there weren't records being processed before those transfers were made. Now, the voter registration system software works on a local level is that a transfer is made to Steve, and then the county resumes making any changes they need to make on their local voter registration, and then they run that transfer again, and anything that's changed since the last transfer then comes up and our statewide database is updated. Well, as Steve looked, the transfers were coming regularly, but there were only 3 days where any records were processed in approximately a 9-week period between November 11th and January the 14th. And on those 3 days, it was only 16 records that we had a record of anything being touched in that time period. So we know he received at least 49 online voter registration transactions to review, and yet only 16 transactions overall had been processed in the same period of time. This doesn't even include the paper voter registrations that would have been coming in during the same time period. And so Mr. Griffey in our office made a call to Mr. Ward, and they talked about the fact that the transfers were being made, but the processing wasn't being done. And Mr. Ward acknowledged that those that yes, that was true. They were transferring, but not processing. Mr. Griffey said this is something you can delegate to a deputy to make sure that these records get timely processed, but Mr. Ward said that this wasn't something he wanted to delegate. He wanted to be the one to approve and send those voter registrations. And then, as Mark alluded to in the beginning, he said there just hadn't been time because of the holidays, which is understandable, but also because of his commitments to other things like his real estate and his rental properties. And so what we saw was an extended period of time, almost 9 weeks, with practically no voter registration transactions. We asked Mr. Ward through Dr. Shannon about this and received some additional information over the weekend regarding voter registrations that had been modified during a similar time period. They provided us with a report that I will have Jessica enter on the record for us, and as we've got this from Dr. Shannon, I believe there's a copy, but we'll put it in anyway. Well, what that report shows on the daily modifications between November 11th and January 29th, there were only 8 days in which voter registration transactions were modified on a local voter registration system level. 8 records on December the 30th. That conversation between Mr. Griffey and Mr. Ward took place in mid-January, and then you see the increase beginning on January 14th as he began to catch up on entering some of these records. But what you have is that extended period of time where those voter registrations were not being processed timely. And what happens when you don't process the registrations timely? We've said it, the prior locations don't receive notice. They remain on the rolls in their old counties. We had over 20 city elections already this year. And so if a voter sent in a registration form in Benton County and wasn't timely processed, they might have an active registration in another county despite not being eligible to vote in that county. And so this board failed its duty to register the voters and allowed voters to remain on the rolls where they were no longer eligible by this delay. That's the front end of the process. I also want to talk about the back end. And that's what we call list maintenance. This is something that's done on a more systematic level every couple of years to make sure the voter rolls are clean. And this is another statutory duty. We've already seen the duty to maintain the voter registration rolls. In conjunction with that, both state and federal law have this list maintenance requirement. And what the state law says is that each county election commission is required to implement an address verification process at least once every 2 years, and that's typically done in an odd year when there aren't any statewide elections. As part of that list maintenance process, the administrator is required to mail a confirmation notice when there's evidence that a voter has moved. And so that's the overview. I want to start by letting Mr. Ward again speak for himself and explain this process to his election commission at a meeting last month, and then we'll look at what the law says about list maintenance. Well, one more thing. The purpose is to identify voters who have moved and are no longer eligible. The important thing here is sending the confirmation notice starts the clock. So when you send a voter a confirmation notice, you put that voter on what's called inactive status. You have evidence they've moved, you send that card out, you make them inactive, and that starts the clock. If they don't have any additional activity for 2 more November election cycles, then they're eligible to be removed from the rolls, because that indicates they no longer live in that county. And so that's any activity at all. That's voting, that's signing a petition, that's turning in an updated voter registration, requesting an absentee ballot, anything, any contact they would have with the election commission office. And so this is how we do the list maintenance process. We look for that evidence, we send that inactive confirmation notice to make a voter inactive, and then we wait and see if there's any additional activity. So let's listen to Mr. Ward explain some of what he does.
That's all I really have. I wanted to show y'all what we were doing though about list maintenance. Y'all understand what list maintenance is?
That's keeping up the
Address verification. This isn't something I can make copies of to give anyone, but I want y'all to look through it. It shows you the communications we've had with the state, the list of people who have moved that we will be sending confirmation cards out to from the state. This is something new that they just started. Normally, under the list maintenance, address verification, we have a computer program we run, and anybody that's not voted in the last 2 federal elections, we put them on inactive and send them a confirmation card. If they send it back to us and say, yes, I'm here, and I want to continue to vote, we just go to the computer and take them off of inactive and make them active again. But if they don't, we keep those confirmation cards on file, and in 2 more federal elections, we purge them and send them away. So we have already got that list of the people that we're going to be purging from the 2017 cycle.
Can I ask how many days? This is for 2017, that's correct?
Yeah, the numbers will. 90 from 2017 will be purged. From the 2019 when the one we run this year, that the way we normally do it, not with the AA list from the state, but the way we do it about the elections, there's 1,119 people that didn't vote in the last 2 federal elections. So we'll be sending confirmation cards out to these people and put them on inactive. We'll activate the ones that send it back to us. The ones that don't, they'll have 2 more federal elections. And when I say activity, either they vote, do a change of address, call us up and say, hey, I'm not sure registered. You can do it online, you can do it just about anywhere now. As long as we have some activity from them, even if they sign a petition in this upcoming election, we will reactivate them because that's let us know they're still here. You know what I mean?
Right, and that's how you verify
This is the way we've always done it in the past. 2017, there was a lawsuit. They asked us to not do it. I have the letter for y'all, but that was from 2017. I had to dig it up. But they asked us to not do it from Mark Owen's office in 2017. Of course, we went ahead and run the numbers. We knew who it was. And we waited until 2019 to actually do that. There's a lawsuit from the state of Tennessee. The Shelby County or Williamson County had a lawsuit against them because they didn't want anybody purchased off of those roads for inactivity. So the state held up the whole state and said, don't do this in 2017. You know what I'm saying? So it didn't affect anything other than some people stayed on the roads longer than they should have. They were addressed in 2019. And of course, they'll be addressed now in 2021 because they'll be being purged if they didn't update. You can see how many updated though. If they're still here, they're going to either vote or they're going to do something. If they're not here, that's the reason for this, is to get off our road roads. So this is something new that the state's done with this NCOA report. This just shows where somebody that's registered in a big county has got a new address in another county or state. So what we're going to do with that report is just send the confirmation card to their new address.
Jump back for just a minute here. Over the past 4 years, based on reporting that Mr. Ward has done, he sent 13 total confirmation notices. He heard some larger numbers in what he was saying there, but in terms of what has been sent out since December of 2016, only 13 confirmation notices have been reported as sent on the reports that he verifies to our office. He makes some additional explanations about the process.
That's all
of this meeting as well.
Is this about the average mark, or is this high?
Well, that's a new thing here. Those are about average. This is something new that we haven't received before. It's going to be redundant, to be honest with you, because those are going to be the same people that we're sending that 1,000 letters to, because they haven't voted in 2 federal elections. It's the people that's new. You know what I mean? So it's a redundant deal.
Some could be deceased.
They could be deceased. They could have moved to a nursing home. They could, it's a whole bunch of reasons. But they didn't have correspondence with us to tell us, hey, I've moved or anything. But these are people who have registered somewhere else. maybe in another state. So,
And so how do you know this? Because the state has told you.
only from that list you look at.
Only.
I only get what they send me, and I don't know. But we've been working hard on that. I know people's been talking, saying that we're not doing our job. We're up to date on every single thing in this office. We're doing it just the same way as we always have.
So let's look at the list maintenance process. You heard what Mr. Ward said. He said there was something new. He said there was a lawsuit in 2017 that led to some changes. None of that is correct. The law changed in 2017 based on legislative action, not based on any lawsuit against any location in Tennessee. The legislature changed the list maintenance process in 2017. Counties received information about these changes via several memos, one of which you heard referenced, but there were several more, and through statewide training. So I want to walk through what changed. The first memo that you heard referenced in that video was this memo from December 21st, 2016. And I've just highlighted it here. And as Mr. Ward indicated, we did ask counties to hold off on the list maintenance process at the end of 2016 not because of the lawsuit, but because we knew the legislature was considering amendments to the list maintenance process. And as it turns out, they did end up making those amendments. And so the law changed. The primary change was the reason confirmation notices are sent. You know, we've said these confirmation notices are sent where there's evidence a voter has moved. Well, under prior law, the evidence could be that a voter has not participated or had no activity for 2 consecutive elections. You heard Mr. Ward make reference to that process in the video as if it was a process that was still under current law. That's been deleted from the law. The process now is based on different evidence that someone has moved. And the most common piece of evidence now is the change of address list from the United States Postal Service. So if you've ever moved and told the post office you have a new address, and I'm sure many folks here have, we get that list, we purchase that list from a vendor, we compare that list to our voter registration database, and then we send that information to counties to say, these individuals who are registered to vote in your county have indicated to the United States Postal Service that they have a new address. And so these folks need to be sent confirmation notices to verify whether or not they still live in your county and are eligible to vote in your county. So you heard about one memo. Let's talk about some of the follow-ups. In May, after the law had passed and the legislature had adjourned, we sent out an update. We told counties that they could resume their purging, that they could look at the voters that they made inactive in 2013 and go ahead and take them off the rolls if they had had no further activity, that those folks were eligible to be removed. But then we were still in the process of getting the NCOA, the National Change of Address process, set up. So we asked them to hold off on sending those confirmation notices until we could train at our statewide seminar. And once again, these were topics at the statewide seminar. You have Mr. Ward's attendance record here on the screen. Both sessions including legislative updates and specifically regarding list maintenance that he indicated he attended during the 2017 summer seminar. What was discussed at those sessions? There's a presentation about the list maintenance program, and it's a thick packet, so I didn't print off a copy for each state election commissioner, but I will give it to Jessica to put in the record and give a copy to Dr. Shannon, as well as the memos we just referenced. But that presentation went A to Z on the list maintenance procedure. There was an outline in the packet. There was a sample list maintenance policy. The counties just need to fill in the blanks so their county election commission can adopt the policy and kick the process off. And so Beth went A to Z through this process, including reminders that the reason the confirmations were sent was no longer because of inactivity, but they were being sent because of the evidence that a voter's residential address had changed. And so all of that was part of the training at the summer seminar in person in 2017. Following the seminar, We spent a little more time creating the list, working with the data for the first time, and sent a list out to the counties, to every county, with a memo with instructions on October the 26th of 2017, referencing back to the training that had been done at the June seminar, that we were going to be using the national change of address data. And so we purchased the list for every county, done the comparison for every county, and in October we released this list to every county of voters who were registered in their counties who had indicated that they had a residential address somewhere else now by turning in notice to the post office. And so on that first list that was sent to Benton County in 2017, you heard him reference in the recent May meeting that this was something new, this was something that hadn't been done before. Well, the 2021 NCOA list is actually list number 3. List number 1 was here in 2017. And on list number 1 in Benton County, there were 361 voters who were identified as having told the Postal Service that they had an address somewhere else now. And looking at what has happened to those 361 voters since October of 2017, 107 have been removed for other reasons at this point. Some have died, some we've received notice in some other way that they moved. 41 have had some sort of other activity or update to the voter registration record based on what we see in the statewide database. And so that leaves 213 voters on the rolls. These 213 voters remain on active status today. They're not inactive. They've not been sent a confirmation notice. They remain on active status, and they have no activity since this list was distributed in 2017. And what the result of not sending confirmation notices to these voters in 2017 is that these voters wouldn't be on the rolls at this point if confirmation notices had properly been sent in 2017. 213 voters who could have been removed from the rolls because they didn't participate or have any other activity from 2017 through the 2018 election cycle through the 2020 election cycle. And all of these folks remain on the rolls. And if they were sent a confirmation notice today and persisted in not having any activity, it'd be 2024 before they could come off the rolls. They'd have to stay on the rolls through November of 2024. And so these are people that could be off the rolls today, but are still on the rolls. Second list was sent in 2019. There were 393 names on this list. Some of them were duplicates because where confirmation notices weren't sent in 2017, some of them were carried over to this 2019 list. Of the 2019 list, there are 91 that have come off the list for various reasons already. There's 28 that have had some sort of activity. But you're looking at 274 voters off the 2019 list who could have started the clock in 2019 and who had no activity through the 2020 election cycle. You'd only be waiting one more election cycle through November 2022 if those confirmation notices had properly been sent in 2019. But those voters remain active. The clock hasn't started. Until the clock starts and 2 more November elections pass, those folks are going to remain on the rolls. I want to share some more things that Mr. Ward shared with his commission regarding list maintenance at these meetings.
Instead, we went above and beyond on list maintenance. The state don't tell us to do this, but I did it. I sent a letter to them at both addresses. You know what I'm saying? Not from this list, but from that list. If they've moved and it comes back and has a new address where they've moved to, we follow up and send it to the funds section. This is the return letters after we've gotten so many of them back from 2000 and I'm sorry, I can't see 19. Yeah, 2019. When we sent them, you see they come back unable to forward, undeliverable, unable to forward, undeliverable. So these are the people that got on inactive and stayed on inactive and they're getting purchased. So we have all the documentation of what we've done.
And so the letter he's referring to there, as he said, he says he goes above and beyond. Well, he's sending something that's unnecessary. The letter he's referencing there, the return mail he's referencing there, is a letter that was sent in 2019, presumably to the folks who became inactive in 2015, because as the letter states, these folks haven't had any activity for 2 federal elections, and so they're ready to come off the rolls. And there's over 600 of these returned letters in a box in Benton County, but these were letters that never had to be sent in the first place. Instead of sending letters to voters who were coming off the rolls, could have used those time and resources to contact the people on these NCOA lists who needed to be sent confirmation notices so they could become inactive to get to this point. And so this was completely unnecessary to notify someone that they're going to be coming off the rolls when you've already sent them a notice saying, we have evidence that you've moved, in 2 more cycles you're going to be purged if you have no activity. To send that follow-up letter is completely unnecessary, especially when you're devoting time and resources to that instead of the actual list maintenance policies that should be adopted and carried out on a biennial, every 2-year basis anyway. And so that's just some of the things that he shared with his commission about list maintenance. And again, you hear the confusion that's created as he refers to old laws if it's current law. When you see, based on this data, that it doesn't appear that he's carrying out the regular list maintenance procedures that are required by state law. And looking back at the minutes of the Benton County Election Commission, it doesn't appear there's been any list maintenance policy adopted since 2015 or 2016. And so he's not advised his commission on their duty to do that so that he could then carry out the confirmation notice process. And so there are voters who remain on the rolls because list maintenance has not taken place. We looked at the 13 confirmations that were sent on as reported on the 6-month report submitted to our office. One thing that we don't really have an answer for is that 592 voters are indicated as having returned confirmation notices over the same period. And how can someone return something that wasn't sent? And he indicates in that meeting at a different point that it's potentially a data processing error with their voter registration system. But as he has the duty to submit this data and these reports to us, you would think such a discrepancy would stand out as you review your own reporting. That if you said this many confirmation notices were coming back, but yet you haven't sent very many, you would think you'd pick up on that before you reported it to us. But that's another part of the allegation regarding list maintenance is the error in reporting that needs to be explained. What were the results of not sending these confirmations? As we said, the clock doesn't start until the confirmation notice is sent. And so these voters who we have evidence based on their telling the Postal Service, they told the Postal Service, I moved, I have a new address, in my mail somewhere else. The clock doesn't start on those voters because the confirmation notice has not been sent. And so those voters remain on the rolls in Benton County, even if they're not any longer eligible to vote. And so by failing to maintain the voter rolls, there are hundreds of potentially ineligible voters who remain on active status and could vote today in Benton County.
Alright, this is our last charge. And you have a packet, failure to ensure proper appointment of election officials. It's the same, it's one charge, but we're going to go over instances, 2 instances. One is where he failed to advise his election commission regarding their responsibility on counting absentee ballots. And then the second is involving the failure to have bipartisan representation in the election process. Again, it's the same charge, it's failure to properly ensure that the appointment of election officials, proper appointment of election officials. Again, his statutory duty is to have knowledge of the laws and to apprise his election commission members and the election officials who implement these laws. Regarding counting of absentee ballots, the statute says if there are fewer than 100 absentee ballots, then the election commission can serve as the counting board. We trained in June of 2016 on this law and specifically explained that, again, if you're fewer than 100, your election commission can serve as the county board. We specifically said if there are 100 or more, your election commission must appoint a separate absentee county board to count the absentee ballots. Mr. Ward attended this session. He indicated, he signed the document saying that he was present. So he heard this presentation, got a copy of this outline. The 2020 minutes for the August 6th election of the Benton County Election Commission reflects that our election commission counted 175 absentee ballots. Their minutes show that on August 6th at 7 p.m. they convened. Paragraph 4, and there's a copy of their minutes in your packet. The election commission next processed all mail-in and nursing home votes. They processed 175 mail-in ballots, 11 nursing home ballots, a total of 185 absentee ballots. Again, in November 3rd, for the November 3rd, 2020 election, our Benton County Election Commission in their minutes report that they counted 495 absentee ballots. They convened their meeting at 2 o'clock on that day. And the third paragraph of their minutes say it was the task of the election commissioners to process and verify the mail-in ballots. They counted 400 mail-in ballots, 50 nursing home ballots, a total of 495 absentee ballots. Again, Mr. Ward's duty is to apprise the election commission of their statutory duties pertaining to absentee county board. Mr. Ward failed to inform the election commission that when he received 100 absentee ballots in both of those elections, they needed to appoint a separate county board. As soon as he received that 100th absentee ballot, he had a duty to inform the election commission, you need to appoint a separate absentee county board. He did that for the August 6, 2020 election and also for the November 2020 election. The second aspect of this same charge, failing to properly appoint election officials, is the failure to ensure proper bipartisan appointment of election officials. Our statute requires half and half Republican, half Democrat in the polling locations. It's a statutory requirement. On election night, the statute requires that an election official of a different party accompany the officer of elections to the election commission office when returning election supplies. The machine technicians are to be appointed Republican, Democrat, half and half. The Republicans have one, the Democrats have one. When Mr. Ward was a representative of the local Republican Party, he actually showed a commitment and an understanding of this, and he went to the Benton County Election Commission meeting, and he said that it was very important for the Election Commission to make sure that the poll workers are equally divided between Democrats and Republicans. Mr. Ward's commitment to this was so strong that he threatened legal action if they did not ensure an equal division of the parties. And you'll see that in the minutes. That if this issue was not addressed, there would be some form of legal action filed. In 2007, Mr. Ward was appointed to the Election Commission, and he suggested there that they have a backup to their then Democrat computer tech, and he wanted the Republicans to appoint their own computer tech. That's fair. He also wanted the Republicans to appoint their own nursing home deputies. That too, that's the right thing to do. In 2008, he suggested that they send a letter to the Republican Party, or to both parties, to get names of individuals who would represent their parties in the election process. That's good. He even suggested that the it says coordinator of elections in their minutes, but really it's the administrator of elections to send a letter to both of those parties, representatives to get a list. He specifically, again, as a commissioner, wanted the administrator to contact the officers of the polling places to make sure that they would have someone of the other party to transport the JBCs to and from the polling places. In 2021, as the AOE, Mr. Ward is quoted as saying that when he began his duties as the administrator, he immediately implemented safeguards for fair elections. One of those things that he did was one of those things that he did was to make sure that there was equal representation between the parties at the polling facilities. And he said that he did that to ensure integrity. During 2006, our training seminar, the coordinator actually did an extensive presentation and gave out handouts on poll official recruitment. Gave sample letters, sample handouts, sample public service announcements, and sample press releases for both the August election and the November general. Again, Mr. Ward was present during this presentation. He's marked that he attended that presentation. When we get to the August 2nd, 2018 election in Precinct 2, we see 6 poll officials at this polling place. 5 were designated as Republican, 0 were designated for the Democratic Party. The 6th person, again, there's 1 person that wasn't designated. This 6th person voted in the Republican primary in the August 2nd, 2018 election. In 2020, Secretary Hargett and Coordinator Goins, they launched a statewide campaign to help our counties recruit election officials, poll officials. But for our November election in 2020 in Precinct 4, we had 6 poll officials in that precinct. All 6 represented the Republican Party. 0 represented the Democratic Party. In Precinct 6 of that same election, there were 8 poll officials. 6 of them represented and were designated to represent the Republican Party, and 1 was designated for the Democratic Party. But when you look at that person's voting history, and you all have a copy of the voting history for that poll official, that person voted in the Republican primaries in the most recent primary elections, including the August 6, 2020. Here's the history there. You can see August 2020, March 2020, August 2018, August 2016, March 2016, and August 2014. The person designated to represent the Democratic Party had voted in each of those primaries. The 8th person had just started voting and did not have any primary history on their voter history. Regarding machine technicians, again, the Democrats get 1, the Republicans get 1, equal representation. In August of 2018, the machine technicians Benton County had 5. 4 of them were Republican, only 1 Democrat. In November of 2020, Benton County had 4 machine technicians, 3 Republicans, 0 designated for the Democratic Party. Machine technicians set up the ballots on the machines, they test the ballots on the machines, they transport the machines. They are an integral part of the voting process. They are actually setting up the machines that capture the vote and the machines that then report the votes. The 4th machine technician in this, who was appointed for this election, has consistently voted in Republican primaries. Again, August 2020, March 2020, August 2018, August 2016, March 2016, August 2014, this person has voted in the Republican Party. As a Republican Party representative, Mr. Ward advocated for bipartisan representation to the point where he threatened legal action. As an election commissioner, he advocated for bipartisan representation to the point where he asked the administrator to send letters to the parties to get names, to the point where he wanted to make sure that she sends letters to the officers to make sure that there was going to be both parties represented in transporting the election documents and materials at the end of the night. Again, the right thing to do. As AOE, he allowed precincts in August of 2018 to be staffed with 5 out of 6 Republicans, and the 6th poll official served without any party designation. In November 2020, he allowed a precinct to have all Republican officials, not one Democratic official. Not only was the Democratic Party not represented through the election, but again, they could not meet the statutory requirement to have the officer accompanied by a member of the other party when we're transporting elections supplies. August of 2018, he allowed 4 out of 5 machine technicians to represent the Republican Party. In November of 2020, 3 of the 4 represented the Republican Party, and again, that 4th person without a designation has a strong Republican primary voting district. As the AOE, Mr. Ward has failed to properly ensure that there's proper bipartisan appointments of our election officials in this county. Thank you for your attention.
At this time, we are through with our presentation, and we will turn it over to Dr. Shannon on behalf of Mr. Ward.
Okay, now, I'm just a small country fella, and what I'm gonna do is knock that thing around a few times when I open up my file, so you'll just have to forgive that. I want to, given the order that was, I was sent, that we're gonna have a statement present, and I will get a chance to present, and we'll have stage rebuttal, my rebuttal, your closing, my closing. So, not wanting to cause any trouble, I do though think it's important that we address something in motion to dismiss because of potential violation of the State Sunshine and Open Meetings Act. So, if you will indulge me. Tennessee has a sunshine law that is found in Tennessee Code annotated 844-101A and states that the General Assembly hereby declares it to be the policy of the state that the formation of public policy and decisions is public business, which shall not be conducted in secret. The Open Meeting Act is found in Tennessee Code annotated 844-102. I won't read all of this, but highlighted sections come from Part B, 1A. The members of the public body, which consists of 2 or more members with the authority to make decisions for or recommendations to a public body or policy or administration. So this, I would think, is the governing body. Under the meeting definition, it says that meetings mean the convening of a governing body for a public body which a quorum is required to make a decision or to deliberate toward a decision on any matter. Also talks about the fact that, you might just run into somebody who's on the board with you. And it says that no such chance meetings, informal assemblies, electronic communications shall be used to decide or deliberate public business in circumvention of the spirit or requirements of this part. So, now that we know what those are, I made a documents request from the state for, and I quote, minutes, audio video recordings of all meetings, reference and accusations where the topic involved Mark Ward. To this end, the only minutes that I received were from the same minutes that included in the allegations packet and labeled attachment 3. You should have that. The meeting to which these minutes refer occurred sometime before April the 8th, 2019. However, in the letter dated April 30th, 2021 and signed by 6 members, all but the chair, it is stated in the opening paragraph that this letter is to, here's the key word, officially request that the Tennessee State Election Commission conduct a show cause hearing regarding the administrative elections for Benton County, Mr. Mark Ward. So when did this official decision get made? And where are the minutes from this meeting? On June 8th, 2021, I received notice that one additional charge and a modification to an existing charge, now part of the show cause hearing, and we've heard on that. Again, when did this meeting take place to consider the additional charge and modifications, and where are the minutes of this meeting? Sadly, and I am sorry that I have to say this, everyone here knows the truth. There have been no meetings. There have been no votes. There have been no compliance with perhaps the open meetings law. Therefore, in light of this, I am compelled to request that the State Election Commission move as a body to dismiss with prejudice all these matters against my client, Mr. Mark Ward. Should you fail to grant this motion, we certainly will preserve our rights for it on people. Madam Chair, would you like to take that motion up at this time, or would you like for me to go through and reserve it till the end?
I think the state gets a rebuttal, right? Do you want this to be it? Okay.
No, I think we should have an opportunity to respond to his allegation.
So, what are you asking me to do, Dr. Shannon?
Specifically, I am asserting that there has been a violation of Tennessee law regarding the Sunshine and Open Meetings Act. That in the letter that was sent to us from this body, it stated that 6 of the members, you were addressed as the person who received it, but did not sign it, which makes sense, I suppose, that you officially request that this take place, that there be a show cause meeting. When did the body meet to officially request such? That was, and I think that is a violation of the Sunshine Law, and as such, we should be heard on the matter, and certainly, regardless of your decision, we will retain it for appeal.
Mark?
Yeah, it's the wrong venue for this motion. This motion, if you want to make it, you can make it for a court. You know that. This is a state election commission. This is not under the law. There's nothing that gives them authority to determine that they violated the Sunshine Law. This is a situation where if you've had ample opportunity to bring this to the court prior to this, if you want to bring it to court after this, then that's fine as well. I move we proceed. I mean, I hope that the state election commission would proceed.
The State Election Commission, sir, in all candor, has absolute authority to decide whether or not they think they violated this, and of their own body decide whether or not they're going to dismiss this matter. If they have the matter to adjudicate it, they also have the power to dismiss it.
You're recognized, Mr. Duffy.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Commissioner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As it relates to the document that council is alluding to, the context of that document, I would proudly say I drafted it. As a result of me drafting it, I sent it to Mark and asked Mark, in his capacity as coordinator of elections, if he would speak with the other members as it relates to whether or not it's duly before us. In my opinion as a lawyer, it is duly before us. If you want to take that up on appeal with some other judicial body, that is your right to do so. But there has been no conferring amongst any of the members of this body as it relates to that letter. Any communications went from me to Mark, and Mark spoke with other members. The purpose of this meeting is to determine whether or not sufficient evidence exists for us to act, and that will be the deliberation as it relates to the issue that is before us today.
Thank you, sir. So we will assume that that is a no on the motion to dismiss. Is that what I understand, Madam Chair?
So there is no motion.
I understand that. Okay, we'll proceed. It is also at this time that we would formally request that Mr. Yance be removed from being able to deliberate on this matter. As to the matter of Kent D. Yonts in the letter dated April 30th, 2021, the 6 members of the State Election Commission asking for a show cause hearing, part of the evidence relied upon is a letter written by Mr. Yonts. As his letter is being used as the basis for these allegations, it would seem that he would not be entitled to vote on the outcome of the matter. He cannot provide both evidence and adjudicate.
I'm not voting. Commissioner asked me to leave, I will, but I'm not.
Oh, I didn't mean for you to leave, sir. I just meant when the vote comes.
understand.
When the vote comes, you don't vote.
I don't think there's anything in the letter that I wrote that would, I don't think there's anything in the letter I wrote that would keep me from voting.
Okay. In the motion to, in the matter of Ms. Donna Barrett, Ms. Barrett has a contract of services with Benton County. And this contract, of course, is heavily influenced by the county mayor as the chief financial officer for the county. And it is certainly that in all the allegations, which we will not go into detail, but you've been provided, as I've been told, with copies of such. Mr. Lashley has been a staunch supporter of removing the former election commission and looking to replace its administrator. As such, in his letter to Mr. Ward dated April 22nd, 2021, Coordinator Goins stated the Republican Party Chair Matthew Jones' selections were a conflict of interest because his brother worked for Mr. Ward. You've heard a presentation on that at this time. So by that measure, should not the same standard apply to Ms. Barrett? And I have copies if you would like to see them. Well, here. The way we work this out is that Miss Summers would be kind enough to pass these out. I'll let that get disseminated before we continue. Give everyone a chance if you wish to flip through them. So, given the fact that Ms. Barrett has a contractual fiduciary interest in the matters of Benton County, and given the fact that it is tied so heavily to the county mayor, and given the fact that the county mayor has, as you well know, had part in the selection of names and all that was there, and these invoices total $14,407.54, and that's just for this month alone, or whatever month is stated on the invoice. So it'll be taken up at the next meeting of the Benton County Commission. I would say that because of this, her objectivity would be compromised, and as such, that she remove herself from voting on this matter.
Commissioner Duckett, you're recognized.
Thank you again, Madam Chair. The issues that council raised are spurious and have nothing to do with the matter that is before us. This is a show cause hearing. We have presented, or the coordinator of election has presented factual evidence as to why he believes this hearing is appropriate. With all due respect, we can talk about who should or should not participate, but that's not going to change for me the ultimate issue of whether or not there has been a dereliction of duty on the part of Mark Ward. And the quicker we can get to whatever facts you want to present, that will enable us to make a decision one way or the other. But in my humble opinion, trying to talk about Mayor Lashley, to which until I saw photos on somebody's website, I wouldn't have known it from Adam, and to talk about a contract which has been legally disclosed year after year is completely irrelevant to this process in my humble opinion. And the quicker we can move on with the 6 issues that have been presented today, the quicker we can reach some resolution, one way or the other.
Well, sir, with all due respect, I was asking Commissioner Barrett to decide on her own conflict. But thank you for your discourse tonight.
You're recognized, Commissioner Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you, Commissioner members, for sitting through this. As I stated in my previous meeting, which Dr. Shannon, you were not present at, there is no conflict of interest. The work that I do for Benton County is no different than I do for 12 other counties in the state of Tennessee. I disclose the Barrett Group contract, the Barrett Group business annually, as I'm supposed to do, as are the other members of this body. The work that I do is work I generate, not what the county brings to me, and none of the work that I do has any contact whatsoever with the Election Commission office.
Thank you, ma'am. I want to start, and I agreed that I would take them in the way that they were presented, so that for those of you that were taking notes, where that's worth to you, but I would like to start off by saying that something was addressed about family, Mr. Jones and Mr. Matthew Jones and Mr. Scott Jones, and people being related. I've never known small towns to have people related to each other. But maybe that's something unusual in Benton County. Anyway, I will point out that falsely accusing the State Election Commission members of improperly appointing election commission county election commissioners is the context of the newspaper article is, of course, Mayor Lashley, not Representative Griffey or Senator Stevens. And I think a full reading of that document, and I have it if you'd like to read it at some point, would make that very clear that the elected official is the locally elected official, not a state representative or a state senator. Obviously, that's going to go on. They represent a much larger number, but a local politician, a county mayor, a county sheriff, a register of deeds, whatever. That was the focus of the letter, that they should not have that level of control over who runs the elections. And that's the focus. A little mischaracterization, I understand. So as we can see, and also there was something made about the pay scales. The pay scales are not determined by the administrator. The county election sets pay scales. So I don't understand if one person is paid more or less. I'm sure they work harder for it. I didn't even get into a debate or discussion with Mr. Ward about any of that. But that's the matter for that. Now to my presentation. Tennessee Code Annotated 212-201-12, which is having knowledge of all current laws pertaining to the election process and any changes mandated by the General Assembly in appraising the Election Commission, office, staff, candidates, and press, and the public in general of this information. That's the law that you saw. That's the law that we've all heard about, and it will be referenced over and over again, as you have already heard. And it's I think it's the linchpin for which they hang lots of things on Mr. Ward and try to prove a dereliction of duty. However, I would be remiss not to point out that the state's own claim specifies appointing county election commissioners. By being appointed, they are not elected. Therefore, any construction of the cited law in the allegation to include the appointment of elected commissioners is flawed. The law simply does not apply to Mr. Ward in this context. It has nothing to do with how the sheriff is elected, how the county mayor is elected, how a state representative is elected. It has everything to do with the appointment process. And that law, again, says that he is all current laws pertaining to the election process. Words matter, ladies and gentlemen, in the law. Words matter a great deal. But we're talking about the appointing of county election commissioners, which has nothing to do with law. Nothing to do with the election process. So the key words, though, in this allegation are pertaining to the election or electoral process, and what do they mean? The words election process occur in addition to the one that we just cited 2 other times. In every instance, the term election process relates to the series of actions or steps taken to achieve an election. Tennessee Code Annotated 220-103B1 states, toward the end, the County Election Commission shall also lock and secure each precinct-based optical scan tabulator used in the election process until the County Election Commission convenes to conduct the audit. Tennessee Code 201-2A says it may require a second signature, etc., and as we get there, necessary for prevention of multiple registration of the same individual for determination of eligibility to vote, or for administration of voter registration, or other aspects of the election process. Its stated purpose then in the opening paragraph of the law is to have an administrative election who shall be the chief administrative officer of the commission and who shall be responsible for the daily operation of the office and the execution of elections, not appointments. It is made all the more evident in Tennessee Code Annotated 212-116. It states that, quote, the County Election Commission shall promulgate such policies as are necessary to aid the personnel of the Election Commission office in the performance of their duties with regard to the promotion of voter registration and, it changed the wording here, electoral process instead of election process, all the same. So it is absurd in the extreme to think that the Election Commission makes policies for something neither it nor its administrator has any control over. I doubt if they really could do that, we would be here today. For the first time in over 50 years, the State Election Commission did not seemingly take the recommendation of the Republican Party chair for the Republican Party members. In a letter from Coordinator Goins to Mark Ward from April 22nd, 2021, it is claimed that, as you've already seen, there was a potential conflict of interest with Mr. Jones making the recommendation since you employ his brother in your office. It is asserted that Senator John Stevens alleged to have said that he did not reappoint the existing members because he did not have to ask or to be reappointed, and despite the law being clear, he's also alleged to have stated, for whatever reason, if it's true, that he did not want to look like a puppet for James Peach. In the aforementioned letter, Coordinator Goins states that the, quote, the senator and the representative did not agree on the names. In those instances, the SEC must decide as to who they appoint. So as we look at the differences here, they must decide who they would appoint. Obviously, there is, when did we debate this? When did we debate all the various aspects of, well, this one said this one said this, there is a potential conflict. If it were not discussed in an open meeting, then how does Coordinator Goins know that this is the reason that they chose to go with Senator Stevens over Representative Green? It is certainly not the protocol we've come to expect with appointments. It is certainly not what the people of Benton County deserve. Given the seeming lack of transparency in one office and the whole of the state government that should understand the need for transparency, is it any wonder that people shake their heads and cry foul? Look at the gathered crowd today. Given the highly unusual way this transition from the former commission to what is passing for the current commission, and when I say what is passing, I mean no disregard to the people, it's just there are currently no Democrats appointed to the commission. So that's what I mean by what is now passing for the commission. It is easy to understand the concerns that Mr. Ward has, and it would seem that some 1,852 people, right there they are, signed a petition saying that they support Mr. Ward in his being the administrator of elections. In a quick straw poll, we found that the procedure that has long been followed in Benton County is the same practice in Houston, Humphreys, and Giles County. We could have gotten more party chairs to respond, but you know how you've selected the local commission members. These counties are just listed as examples that the pattern is followed in other places. So, as to the charge of falsely accusing the state election commission members, and all that is there is no law upon which you may adjudicate him innocent or guilty of this matter, because it doesn't apply to appointments. To the matter of, what I got, and you were handed a copy of, I believe, this is number 5, if that matters. illegally advising the Benton County Provisional Ballot Counting Board not to count provisional ballots legally cast by a voter. Well, first, the statement is patently false on its face for a couple of reasons. First being that the Administrator of Elections must appraise the Election Commission of all current laws according to Tennessee Code annotated 201-12. As this is a statutorily mandated, logic dictates that it cannot be illegal for Administrator Ward to perform his duties. Again, I will read the charge. Illegally advising the Benton County Provisional Ballot Counting Board, illegally advising them, it should have read, I suppose, if he wanted this to be the real charge, advising not to count a legally cast vote. But he said it was legally advising, and given the structure, it's not good. It's a false charge. The second stems from minutes taken from January 19, 2019, meeting before the State Election Commission. The allegation states that, quote, you admitted you advised the Benton County Provisional Counting Board to not count provisional votes from voters who attempted to register to vote and showed up to vote on election day. And this is also the same quote used by Mr. Goins in the letter dated April 22nd, 2021, sent to Mr. Ward. However, and I think this is important that you look at this matter, this is not an accurate quote of what Mr. Ward stated that day. The exact quote from the meeting is as follows. Mr. Ward stated he advised his Provisional Counting Board not to count voters who had attempted to register to vote and vote on election day. In other words, Mr. Ward takes the position that same-day registration and voting are unlawful. And so if we're talking about I wish to register to vote and I vote that day, that's what he stated. It has been blown up to all sorts of other things. That is not what the man said. And so the whole reason Mr. Ward came to the meeting, which was he instructed to do so by his election commission, was to see if the law had changed from what it had been in the 10 years since he started as administrator. It would seem that Coordinator Goins understood what Mr. Ward was asking, because in his answer, he explains that the attempt to register must occur before the voter registration deadline. Again, same-day registration and voting, illegal. That's what Mr. Ward was there to ask about. He was told that the law is the same as it's always been. Can't register the same day and vote. However, there are two other aspects of this allegation that I wish to address. First, in the letter dated April 30th, 2021, which is the same letter designated as Attachment 1 in the listing of allegations against Mr. Ward, 6 members of the State Election Commission state that, quote, he has failed to count a properly cast provisional ballot. Stating that Administrator Ward decides if provisional ballots count is not the law at all. Under Tennessee Code annotated 27112A3B, the power to count provisional ballots is delegated to the Central Provisional Ballot Counting Board, not the Administrator of Elections. I genuinely do not understand how 6 members of the State Election Commission could have such a misunderstanding of that law. Secondly, in an email dated August 6, 2018 from the Office of the Coordinator of Elections regarding the provisional ballot cast in the August 2018 election, Mr. Goins' office takes the position that while I will not mention the agency here, does not have a copy of the declaration for June 6, 2018. And here is the important matter. Let's see if I have that for you. You'll have to forgive me. You got me outgunned 3-1. I'll let you read that part. Now that you've had a chance to look at that, I want to point out to you again the date of that email. August the 6th, 2018. Okay? And so, did not have a copy of the declination, and his office, here we are, quote, cannot determine if he did or did not attempt to register to vote. Quote. So they can't determine if this man attempted to register to vote or not. On August the 6th, 2018. But he goes on to say something that is extraordinary. It says that he gives the advice through his communications person, Ms. Summers, that the Central Provisional Ballot Counting Board should count the provisional ballot. They cannot determine if he attempted to register or not, and yet they're saying he should vote. That is illegal. When compared to the statute, Tennessee Code 27112A3B4, that's a mouthful, requires that before a vote can be counted, the person casting a vote through a provisional ballot must have met the statutory requirements for registration. These requirements require an affirmative duty on the part of the voter before the day of the election. This is just what Mr. Goins' office provided in training during the 2010 summer seminar. He had 4 questions. I will only read the first one because it's the only one that matters. Did they register to vote? Of those 4 questions, you must go through and ask each one of them yes, 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 and as you make your way through. If at any time you say no, it's over. There's no vote. We don't even get past the first one. Did they register to vote? It is unknown by the coordinator of elections. Now, there's no fault in that statement. That's providing what we know. We do the best we can with what we have. But when we say we should just go ahead and count the vote, and then because that provisional ballot counting board didn't choose to count the vote, we're calling him up here for a show cause hearing. Doesn't seem to be fair. So we've shown that first, Mr. Ward may advise the Benton County Provisional Count Board. Second, the advice that Mr. Ward gave his board regarding same-day registration and voting is, in fact, the law. Third, there was a gross misunderstanding on what the law was by the State Election Commission. And Mr. Goins' office seems to have indicated a direction that isn't consistent with state law regarding the ballot cast in 2018. It bears pointing out that the election results from Benton County from the August 2018 election were accepted and certified by the coordinator's office without another mention of this infamous provisional ballot until now, nearly 3 years later. Not a big. Well, do I have to say the same thing about the November 18 provisional ballots? Well, I guess to make it part of the record. It bears pointing out that the election results from Benton County from the November 2018 election were accepted and certified by the coordinator's office without incident or commentary until now, nearly 2.5 years later. If we're talking about timeliness, folks, let's talk about timeliness. Things need to be done decently and in order. Number 4. Demonstrating partiality at the November 18, 2019 Benton County Commission. I will not put you through that video again. You can watch it yourself, but if you do want to watch it before you make a decision, I've got timestamps for you if it matters. In this allegation, it is asserted that at the November 18, 2019 meeting of the Benton County Commission, Mr. Ward stated that he was at the meeting in his official capacity as Administrator of Elections. In the video recording, the timestamp for this statement is made around 5:16 into the meeting. We do not deny that this statement was made around this time. However, there is more to the story regarding this meeting and Mr. Ward's statements. As I have said repeatedly throughout this whole thing with everybody that I've talked to, including Mr. Goins, context is everything. Context is everything. First, Mr. Ward was not an invited guest of the commission that evening. Around 2 minutes and 34 seconds into the meeting, it is announced that the period that covers Mr. Ward's statements is part of the citizens forum. In fact, you will see other people get up. I think the road commissioner gets up and gives a cursory review of things. The director of schools gets up and makes a cursory review of things, whatever. And then Mr. Ward gets up at some point or another. Mr. Ward states that first, he is there in his official capacity as administrator of elections. He then gives the commission an update on a possible ballot measure regarding the recent appropriation of monies by the commission. That was what he did as the administrator of elections. Okay? However, around timestamp 6:55, he states that he has a couple of things to speak about to the commission under the citizens forum. Now, I've added the word under the citizens forum. His exact quote was a couple of things. Around timestamp 7:32, he says that, quote, I personally, goes into some other things. Around timestamp 13:35, he says, quote, my personal opinion. Now, around timestamp 18:10, and you got to hear part of that, Chairman Ward Plant starts a discourse with Mr. Ward that devolves quickly in more of a personal attack on Mr. Ward. Chairman Plant asks Mr. Ward at one point, quote, where were you at that time, referring to 2 years ago, if you're so diligent about, and I honestly could not make out what he said, but you get what he's saying. Mr. Ward stated, as asserted in the allegations around timestamp 1932, in response to Mr. Chairman Ward's questions, that he was only, or Chairman Plant's questions, that he was only involved because his office had to process the petition. That's true. His office did have to process the petition. Mr. Ward, Plant, goes back to and brings Mark Ward into another discussion about his duty. He says, I'm only here because of the petition. In regards to that, he actually says later on at the end of it, I don't care what you do. It's all good. It's all good. So he doesn't regularly insert himself in the political workings of the Benton County Commission. It is clear that Mr. Ward took an opportunity as Administrator of Elections to inform the Commission about the potential ballot measure. This particular meeting allowed the Commission to change course ahead of the petition being filed that would have placed the matter before the people as a referendum. Now, it was above and beyond the call of duty for him to take the time to make the Commission aware of this. However, this was not his only purpose in being there, and he took adequate measures to ensure that only reasonable people hearing reasonable people hearing him would have understood that he was giving his opinion as a citizen and taxpayer. I will remind you that these meetings take place after working hours. So he was not on the clock when he was there. And he made some comments about how the county was conducting business in a manner in which he did not agree. In other words, he was exercising his First Amendment right to political speech after he had designated that this was personal. It should not be imputed to him as a violation of his oath. After all, the matter was not even on the ballot at the time. And, for your information, the issue never came to a referendum. Item 1. Failing to timely process voter registrations. The allegation asserts that under Tennessee Code Annotated 2-120A, Mr. Ward did fail to timely process voter registrations. However, when I read the statute in its entirety, I see references to deficiencies, but I did not see any references to timeliness. Conspicuously missing from the law. To timely process that which the time is not required in the law. Well, that's just made up. During this time, which includes Thanksgiving, Christmas, COVID-19 shuts down, and the completion of the EBS, in which Learned Counsel Mr. Dodd said that was perfectly understandable about this thing when it comes to list maintenance and whatnot. We understand during this time. But the EBAS is a very complicated matter, as I've been told. It takes a while after the election, November election, to get it all processed through. Mr. Ward had to deal with the absence of his deputy administrator, Mr. Scott Jones. Mr. Scott Jones is one of the finest people I've ever had the privilege of meeting. But regrettably, he is dealing with severe health issues that keep him out of the office for extended periods. In essence, Mr. Ward has been a one-person show for the better part of 3 years. When an election was not going on, despite this, On every voter, on county voter registration inspection report, Mr. Ward has always made sure that every voter registration has been processed so that the election commission can review all those received since the last inspection report. Running an office by yourself is hard. There was at one time an assistant to the deputy who was hired, and that's part of the conversation that's coming later, but that's the only help he's had. I want to show you something that helps you better understand the degree that Mr. Ward goes to. Mr. Ward goes to. I set them over here. Miss Summers, you're going to have to help me with you. Thank you. Mr. Ward was taking, just to tell you the dedication to this man, he was making sure that I didn't mention the name of the voter. And I wasn't going to do that, but he just cautioned me, he said, you're not going to mention the name on it. That's the kind of man that Mark Ward is.
Could you repeat that?
What I was saying is that as you were having that handed out to you, it has the name of the voter on it. Okay. Mr. Ward leaned in and gave me instruction. He said, you're not going to say the name on it. That's the kind of man this public servant is. Or I guess I should say it's the other way around. This is the kind of public service man. As you look at this, the first page, as you can see from the form that I supplied you, this information was generated from the state's online voter registration system. Now, scanning down that long column, look closely at the response to felon. As you can see, it is marked in for no. Does anybody have trouble finding that? On the very first page, it's in for no. Now look at the new form I supplied you on page 2. You will see that on this form, what is styled more in the traditional registration card format, the response to felon is now marked Y for yes. Mr. Ward caught the error that should not exist. The error should not exist. And personally went to the voter's residence to have her sign a new card declaring that she in fact was not a felon, as she indicated when she used the system. That is what page 3 represents. There was inconsistency in the state's own online voter registration system. There was inconsistency. The data got scrambled somehow in the state's own online voter registration system. I share this story with you for 2 reasons. First, Mr. Ward is doing an excellent job of running the office. Second, when they say that things cannot change in secured systems, remind yourself of this story. Paper trails are a good thing. A very good thing. I understand what was stated earlier about the need of person change address and all this stuff, being able to vote. There are no elections in Benton County in 2021. There are no elections in 2021 in Benton County. Every necessary voter registration that had to be processed was processed. For example, those needing their CDLs had their voter registration immediately processed. It is also asserted that on more than one occasion, staff has been told that Mr. Ward did not have time to fulfill his election duties due to his real estate business. When I specifically asked for a list of all staff members who made allegations that Mr. Ward stated the reason he was late in processing voter registration was in part due to his real estate business and the said date of conversations and any recordings of these conversations, including emails, I was given the following reply. Quote, the 2 staff members to whom Mark Ward commented that he would, quote, did not have time, end quote, for an election-related task were, and those names need not be mentioned. I could not help but be a bit curious over the admission of any real estate business language from the response, did not have time. According to the witness, sometime after the August 2nd, 2018 election, Mr. Ward was contacted about having his county election commission members participate in a conference call over cybersecurity concerns regarding the Benton County Election Commission website. Mr. Ward remembers the conversation well. He had already told the commission about the conference call when it was first announced. Given the extraordinary cybersecurity that is already in place in the Election Commission office, they decided not to participate in this optional conference call. Optional conference call. The staff members called the day before the conference call to ask Mr. Ward to call each of his commissioners to remind them of the meeting. He told the staff member that Deputy Scott Jones was out for medical reasons, and he was by himself in the office that day. People were coming in to register for the next election. It was just a hectic time. He asked if someone in the state office could call for him. The staff member said it was understood, asked about Mr. Jones, and the staff member would lift him up in prayer. At no time during this conversation was any real estate business mentioned by Mr. Ward. For your information, after the close of business that day, Mr. Ward did call each of his members to remind them of the conference call. As to the breach of the website, thank you again, man. As to the breach of the website is not housed in Benton County or in any computer in the Benton County Election Commission office. It is hosted by Perfect Choice Marketing, whose owner is Mr. Danny Crum. You have a copy of the email from Mr. Crum. As you can see, Benton County's website has not had any real or concerning issues. Again, I will not go into a detailed explanation of the extraordinary, and I don't use that term lightly, security that exists in the Benton County Election Commission's office. But I'll tell you, if it's an issue for you, you want to know it, I'll outline it for you. I will say this to that security, that no computer that is actively engaged in the data of voters is on the internet at any time. Not one. They have a mechanism in place which they use a intermediary computer. It has a limited time that it's on connected and move forward from there. But it's really quite extraordinary what they do. Mr. Ward asked if everybody would like a break. I don't know. When you get people moving up and shuffling, I guess it's maybe time for
that might be a good idea. Does that make sense? Or is that allowable? Okay. Can I have a motion for the State Election Commission to go in recess? All in favor?
Good job.
No, I was going down 70 Highway. It's a bridge at Campbell, going to New Johnsonville. On Sunday afternoon, she crossed the road. Neither one of us were right. That's how close. She was running 70 and I was running 40. They were working on the roof and they just put up the radar. That's what they said. She was running 70 minutes at 0.157. Yeah, that hip, that ankle.
Oh, really? So you found it out?
Yeah. Yeah. And evidently I seen it just enough to lock my feet on the floor. I don't know. I think it may have been bad. The airbag was low. Even if I hadn't braced myself, I wouldn't have jumped over. So, but just saw, of course, she didn't get that. They had got her. She was in, I was in the hospital. She was in the bedside Chevrolet. They didn't get her. The girl in the back of the ambulance. Yeah, I know that story. Yeah. I got a toe sack. Like you put blood takers come in, and they put a rope around that and put it in each corner, and that's how I know about the debilitated, that I had a toe sack.
Well, they're afraid to get it.
Well, that was his little girl too. Yeah.
I now call this meeting back to order. Dr. Shannon, you're recognized.
As we were talking, the website did not have any real issues at all, and so it was deemed by the county election commission that attendance or participation in that original call was not necessary. In the second conversation, Mr. Ward again remembers it. Every day the Benton County Election Commission staff or Mr. Ward submit their daily voter registrations. Because Mr. Ward does not always process voter registrations daily, the Benton County tally shows 0 for these days. A staff member called with Mr. Ward and asked about this practice, and here's where you're going. Thank you. I am sending around for you a copy of an email of an employee who was the assistant deputy because of Mr. Scott Jones's medical need to leave, and to provide context for that conversation. As you can see in that email, it says that there was no or never mention of Mr. Ward's real estate business because she could hear all of Mr. Ward's conversation, or what she said, the majority of it, or something to that effect, whatever the words were, the context is clear, that she could overhear his side of the conversation, and he wasn't talking about his real estate business. He was then handed off the phone call to her so that she might be able to help the staff member. And as you see, that he seemed to be a bit irritated and agitated about what was going on, and she said it was very difficult for her to follow, but she tried to take care of everything he needed. So that explains those delays for that conversation. Now, because of these inconsistencies in what has been asserted in these allegations, and what I found in my own investigations, I have moved to examine more closely a statement that Mr. Goins made in the presence of State Representative Bruce Griffey and myself when he visited the Benton County Election Commission to gather some documents. Representative Griffey, with my consent, made an overture for a ceasefire, if you will. While these efforts were fruitless, Coordinator Goins said that he had spoken to at least one member of the Benton County Election Commission. Mr. Goins' statement about the substance of that conversation implied that the Commission faithfully followed whatever Mr. Ward told him to do. Mr. Ward tells us what we need to know. I wanted to know about that conversation, what was said in the context of these statements, or when I asked each member of the now former Commission to a person, each denied ever speaking to Mr. Coordinator Goins in any substantive way. He also stated that they never once spoke to Coordinator Goins or members of his staff regarding issues with Administrator Ward or the Benton County Election Commission while serving on the commission. So, I went back to even older members of the Election Commission to ask about this conversation. Again, to a person, the same result was found. And all the former commission members that I spoke to signed an affidavit affirming these facts. I have them here. While not in his affidavit, the former commissioner, Rick Johnson, while he was chair, tells the story how he tried to speak to Mr. Goins in a legislative breakfast, only to have Mr. Goins walk away from him. He is still mad about that to this very day. You can make of that story what you will, but as you have based so much on your allegations of what Mr. Goins wrote, I thought you should know what I found out. Just wanted to find out the information, and that's where it led to. Allegation 2. Failing to perform required list maintenance duties to maintain accurate voter registration records. In the response to this allegation, we do not know why the 6-month reports are not showing the correct number of sent confirmations. I spoke to Dave Embry, and we agreed that a yet unidentified software glitch might be causing this number to be deficient, but we don't know. The confirmation labels were processed, though, and that should have rolled them over in the software into the confirmation set column, but it did not. The fact is, we have the return envelopes from where the batch of confirmation requests was sent, in a recent call with the data specialist in the coordinator's office. When I say recent, this week, last week, very close to time, last week, he seemed to indicate to Mr. Ward that we were on track for the 2021 list maintenance cycle. We also assert that the 6-month reports were accepted by the coordinator's office, with no report being returned to the Election Commission office from December 16 forward to the correction, which is the time, again, referenced in the allegation. And finally, to our last one, failure to ensure the proper appointment of election officials during the election process. A lot has been made about Mr. Ward's statement on April 22nd, 2021 in our local paper, especially the statement, "I immediately involved safeguards for fair election, including keys for all ballot boxes and voting equipment for both parties. Each party has their own locks for each ballot box and all other election equipment. Equal representation between parties at each of the polling facilities, and hiring a Democratic Party representative to work in election day during early voting, as well as an election day in order to secure election integrity." Ms. Summers. I'll send those out ahead of me talking about them, but that way if you want to read over them. What is not stated about that is the obvious, that Mr. Ward cannot make any of these changes under his authority as administrator of elections. The Benton County Election Commission made these changes. It did so at his urging, but the ultimate decision on procedures and workers was and remains with the Commission. Tennessee Code Annotated 24102A, the County Election Commission shall appoint. This is regarding the appointment of election officials and inspectors. Tennessee Code 24104, not more than 2 of the judges at a polling place may be the same political party if persons from different political parties are willing to serve. This has to do with judges to be of different political parties. Tennessee Code Annotated 24105A, is nearly as practical, the definition of course practical, is be done in a practice successfully. No more than 1/2 of the number of election officials at a polling place. This has to do with election officials and inspectors. As nearly as practical, no more than 1/2. Tennessee Code Annotated 24106B, the County Election Commission shall appoint such nominees as election officials who meet the requirements as stated in several of the ones we've already read. But when there is an inadequate number, of nominees, the County Election Commission may nominate as many additional persons as may be necessary for appointment, and that has to do with nominations or appointments as election officials. Tennessee Code 212-202A, the majority party members of the County Election Commission shall appoint 1 precinct registrar for each polling place, and the minority party members of the Commission shall appoint 1 precinct registrar for each polling place. This, of course, has to do with precinct registrars and assistants. There's no mention that the selected registrar has to be a voting member of the party that selected him or her. No mention of the standard that the state has applied in showing you the data about who was Republican and who was Democrat. Because last I remember, in Tennessee, we do not have registered parties. So there are no registered Democrats. There are no registered Republicans. The allegation goes on to state that without having at least 1 Democrat election official at these polling places, the officer of elections could not have been accompanied by an election official of a different political party as required in Tennessee Code Annotated 27138. This statement and others in this allegation have been made mainly because of an unfair, overly rigid standard that is not found in the law. I will not repeat what I just stated. The state seeks to examine the workers' voting history. The plain truth, though, is that in 2009, which is the context of the opening statement of Mr. Ward's letter to the paper, it was far easier to find party purists. However, in 2018 and now, things have dramatically changed. Many long-standing Democrats now regularly vote Republican. Each election, the Democrat members and Republican members of the Commission provide a list to Mr. Ward. However, by being replete with exceptions to strict adherence to party affiliation, The law recognizes what Benton County Election Commission and its administrator, Mr. Ward, know to be true. The election has to happen. Can you imagine if we didn't hold an election in Benton County because we didn't have a Democrat sitting here and a Republican sitting there? My God, what would that be? Would you like to deal with that one? No. We secured some affidavits from workers in the August 2018 and November 2020 elections. That's what the state sent us. To show the election workers understood that they had been selected as party representatives. Specifically, we present the affidavits of Stanley Rowland and Mike Stockdale. Mr. Stockdale has been the Democrat-selected computer technician for several years. In fact, as an interesting twist of fate, he took over for me when I was the only computer worker back in a long lifetime ago. Mr. Stockdale, on the day of the election in August 2018, one of the two machine technicians for the Democrats did not arrive. Mr. Stanley Rowland volunteered his time to help, which explains why he's not on the payroll list. The law did not require the Election Commission or Mr. Ward to go to these lengths. Still, returning to the local paper article, Mr. Ward states, I quote, "My goal has always been to run the election office as nonpartisan, ensuring everyone has fair treatment regardless of their party or elected position." My goal, and he has lived up to that goal. The 2020 election cycle was unlike any in modern history. Workers were hard to come by. People were sick or afraid. Even this very day, there are people wearing masks in this meeting. Hand sanitizer, masks, and gloves are everywhere if you want them. People were sick and afraid. And while every effort was made by the County Election Commission to get Democrat Party representatives, and I've got the meetings in June or whatever date it was in 2020 where the Democratic Party chair was there and they had the list and they were looking at everybody trying to make it work. In some instances, it just could not be done. If this is considered failure, it should not be laid at the feet of the Commission or Administrator Ward. Neither he nor the Election Commission could control who is eligible or, far more correctly stated, willing to work in the middle of a pandemic. If you ever thought about the age of the workers of elections, what age range do you think they are? Well, I don't know what they are anywhere else because I've always voted in Benton County, a proud native. And I'll tell you, they're in the target range. We successfully conducted multiple elections in Benton County and across the state despite the pandemic. It is a testimony to the fine men and women who make up our local election commissioners, their administrators, and the brave workers who came out to do their civic duty jobs. The fact is that it is even brought up in these allegations is a slap in the face of all of those I've just mentioned. Shame, shame. Tennessee Code Annotated 26302B. If the County Election Commission determines that there are fewer than 100 absentee ballots to be counted, the County Election Commission may act as the central absentee ballot counting board without additional compensation. Notice who has the authority to appoint the board. The County Election Commission. The County Election Commission in Benton County has been proudly serving up until the reappointment of other people for several years now. They knew the law. It had not changed. They decided on it. The governor, however, acting under authority granted him by Tennessee Code Annotated 582107, enacted a series of executive orders to help deal with the COVID-19 pandemic. The August 2020 election was held with Executive Order 50 being in effect. The November 2020 election was held with Executive Order 67 being in effect. Both of these orders state that, and I cannot stress this any more passionately than I'm about to, social distancing remains imperative. The words of our governor. Imperative. To effectuate the imperativeness of this order, any law, order, rule, or regulation that would otherwise limit the enforceability of these orders is suspended pursuant to the aforementioned law. The absentee county room is quite tiny. You get the picture. Therefore, all of the allegations regarding violations with the absentee ballot during November and August 2020 are rendered moot by executive order. Why would you bring in however many other people you need to do, work in close proximity to them so that you can train them on something that they haven't done, because most of the time, Benton County doesn't even get anywhere near 100 absentee ballots. And do all that and expose people, one of which has a serious health problem, who was on the former commission. Why would you do that? When under this executive order, it could be done expediently and efficiently. And in fact, that commission came in and gave 2 extra hours to process the election, and we turned it in on time. We turned it in on time. We had an election, and we should be commended for it, rather than being here. We rest.
All right, I'll be brief in my rebuttal. I'll hit bullets. It's interesting, the defense is, we admit it. We admit these things happen. But don't blame Mark Ward, blame the election commission. It's really interesting that the fuss is, oh, we removed this election commission, the greatest election commission ever, but yet we just heard repeated after every allegation. It's not Mark Ward's fault, it's the election commission's fault. But that would be interesting take on the statutes. I've already shared with you the duty, we've gone over that, but let's revisit 2-12-116, and let's look at 1. The commission shall appoint administrative elections, who shall be the chief administrative officer of the commission. Who's the chief administrative officer of the commission? Under the statute, that would be Mark Ward. What's he responsible for? He's responsible for the daily operations of the commission office and the execution of all elections. Dr. Shannon said, well, the execution of all elections, what he brought up, it's really not part of the execution of election. Let me tell you, if we don't have poll officials working at polling locations, we're not going to execute an election. If we're not counting provisional ballots, we're not executing an election. The list goes on. If we're not processing voter registrations, we're not executing an election. To say that all of this is on the election commission and not on Mark Ward is just patently false. When you look at what Dr. Shannon is, where was the denial? Where was the denial? There was no denial. Let's look at the statute. We talked about machine technicians, one of the positions that Matthew Jones had. Under 2-12-116, the commission shall appoint voting technicians as required in 2-9103, but who do they work for? A voting machine technician shall work under the direction of the administrator. To say that the administrator of elections doesn't have any of these responsibilities is absolutely ludicrous. What are we paying someone $70,000 for? This is absolutely bizarre. But if the facts are not on your side, that's what you do. You divert. I heard Dr. Shannon say, well, no, really what Mark Ward was saying was he was obligated to Brent Lashley. You heard his own words. Obligated to Senator Stevens. That is the process all across the state. If you are a state representative, if you're a state senator, under the statute, you get the opportunity to make recommendations, and it is the process. Nobody's obligated to anybody. It's the process. And if Mark Ward doesn't like the law, he needs to ask the legislators to change the law. What we heard on provisional ballot in November, they didn't deny it. You did not hear denial. What you heard was there was a time limit on disenfranchisement. Well, let me tell you, if you're that voter in Henderson County where there's 15,000 voters that voted and it was a tie election, there's not a time limit. That voter realizes that their vote would have been counted in that scenario, and the same fact system arrived, they would have been the deciding vote. Never heard of that before. Time limit on disenfranchisement. The August 2018, let's look at that a little bit more. I looked at that, and what that says is, and so the actual election code says there's 2 responsibilities. One is to make sure that we protect the integrity of the election system. The other one is, to the fullest extent possible, you need to make sure folks are enfranchised. And so here's what the facts really show in the August 2018 provisional ballot. It shows that the voters said, I want to register to vote. That's what it shows. It doesn't say, and what he shared with us is they couldn't find a declination. don't mince words here. What a declination is, I'm declining to register to vote. What they found was the voter said, I am registering to vote. This is exactly what the provisional ballot process was set up for. The voter said it before the 30-day deadline. They're at the agency. The agency says, do you want to register to vote? At that point, when that voter says, I want to register to vote, the burden shifts over to the agency to make sure that that vote is counted. That voter's voter registration form gets to the administrator. What happens? Sometimes it doesn't always happen. But if the records show, state law requires that we look at every agency. We have to go through. It's not because, we're not going to count the vote if they said yes at the agency. The reason we check every provisional ballot through the agency is to see if they said they wanted to register to vote. And if they say they want to register to vote, that's the provisional ballot process. As long as they meet that 30-day deadline, they get to vote. It's not same-day registration. What happened was this customer told the agency, I want to register to vote, and they did it timely. Partiality. Another defense was he was off the clock. Well, there's a little problem with that. And the problem is, you heard it multiple times. I'm here in what? My official capacity. I didn't make Mark Ward say that. Brent Lassie didn't make Mark Ward say that. Senator Stevens didn't make Mark Ward say that. Who made Mark Ward say that? Mark Ward. After hours, well, the meeting's after hours, at that point, the County Election Commission, he's off the clock. Most of the County Election Commission meetings across the state are after hours. If we take that lackadaisical attitude, then we'll not function as a body. Elections, last time I checked, the polling locations close at 7, they close at 8. We're working after hours. What I have actually truly learned, an administrator of elections and administrator and the coordinator of elections of my staff, if you do your job right, and frankly, if you have other outside distractions, it's difficult to do your job right. But if you do your job right, it's a 24/7. We're always on. The most ludicrous defense, and I honestly couldn't believe I heard it. And frankly, if there's a newspaper reporter that's listening to this, I suspect this will be the headline. The defense of the administrator of elections was, there is no timeline for processing voter registrations. Benton County didn't have an election. So, all right, we don't have to process them. How selfish do you have to be? At the same time, Benton County may not be having an election. Other cities are having elections. Those folks are relying on Benton County to do their job, to process voter registrations. Why? Because if he doesn't process them, if he doesn't let the state know, then that county that person's registered in, they don't know. They don't know that voter's ineligible now. We heard, well, all these things happen. Please excuse him, not Mark Ward or the Election Commission, whoever you're trying to blame. It just didn't have enough help. And I will agree with Dr. Shannon on one thing. The election has to happen. And part of that means that you are sufficiently staffing your office. Who's the Chief Administrative Officer of the Commission? That's the responsibility of the Administrator of Elections. State law. It's not Mark Lawrence, that's state law. You saw a red herring about the security part. That's really a red herring. That was actually not part of the complaint today that I can recall. That was a response from Dr. Shannon. He requested who had heard various statements. We never said that Beth is the person. We never heard Beth. Beth never said that she heard that he was doing real estate duties. That's not what she said. And that's not what's in the complaint. We said one person. And then we said, that's not the first time we've heard that Mark Ward was too busy to do his duties. That was the cybersecurity incident. I will admit that. But at the end of the day, that's not even part of this. This was an answer to, it's a red herring, total red herring. And the actual statement that he shared with Beth was, I don't have time, our recollection is I don't have time to call my commission. And so what do we do? And to signify the factual basis of that, at that point I called Secretary Harding. Because actually it was Donna Barrett who said, I appreciate you glossing over the incident, but it wasn't a glossy incident. It could have been major. And I see that, you know, the person that says the website that he's worked with the Department of Homeland Security, he did that because we set him up with the Homeland Security. Let's be serious about what we're talking about here. But anyway, the conversation was, Don Merritt said, this is serious. I want the election commissioners to be on this call. So we called Mark Ward, and Mark Ward said, I don't have time to call him. And if you're asking for the time that I talked to the election commissioner in Benton County, this was it. Mark Ward told us, so Secretary Hardy said, you call him. So we, as a staff, we started calling election commission members. And I called an election commission member, and I shared with him, I said, you know, the troubling comment is that Mark Ward has said, I tell them what they need to know. That's what he said. I tell them what they need to know, I don't have time to call them. And the election commissioner that I spoke to said, I agree with that, we trust what Mark does in the office. That's the conversation. But it's a red herring, it has nothing to do with this hearing. That was just a question that you had asked us. It was Mr. Griffey that had called, and Mark at that point said, I have real estate, outside real estate duties, and that's why I haven't been able to do it in the holidays. Well, he admits on the video that he makes 10 times what he makes as the administrator. He owns half of Benton County, so I mean, yeah, he's busy with real estate. Confirmation notices, Mr. Dodd addressed that, and what we heard was something totally different. So we actually thought we might have gotten it wrong, because the way that Mr. Ward explained it at the County Election Commission meeting, the way it sounded was, I sent the confirmation notices. I sent them. Here's a big box of them. Here, go through them. So we went down and looked at every one of those in that box. Those weren't confirmation notices. He didn't do his job. What he did do was try to make it look like he did, and he told this election commission that he did, but he didn't. What those were letters from a previous time where he was actually purging these individuals. These folks were coming off the road. These weren't learning them to say, hey, it's time to put you in the inactive status. And if there's something that shows otherwise, then when we requested those documents, we didn't get the documents we requested for because we were very clear in our requests. And let's talk about poll officials. Yeah, it's clear. He says 2009. He implemented this process. But, you know, he didn't write this in 2009. He wrote this, and it was published on April the 22nd, 2021. So if Mark Ward hadn't been able to ensure fairness in appointing poll workers at the local election commission office, he should have qualified that. He should have said, in the beginning, we were able to ensure this. But now we're not. That's not what he said. He lied to the Camden Chronicle, and he lied to the public about what was actually going on. County Board. Oh my gosh. Here's another one. The County Election Commission decided to violate the law. That was the defense. The County Election Commission decided to violate the law. And the reason they did that is because of COVID-19. The rooms, they're small rooms, they're not bigger. That would work if it weren't for the fact that the State Election Commission and all County Election Commission members have read and had a copy of it. Mark Ward got a copy of it. We developed a COVID-19 plan. We started developing that plan in April. We officially released it in May. Very specifically, we talked about making sure there's social distancing. Some counties may need to get larger room. And oh, by the way, make sure you recruit enough poll officials and do it now. If you weren't convinced before, I know you're convinced now. The defense was, we admitted, it's not the administrator, although he's getting paid to do the job. All we ask, and we ask this all across the state, is that administrators do the job that they're set to pay. That's the rebuttal. He gets a rebuttal, and then I get a chance to close.
Well, I suppose we could go back to that email that says where we can't find that we ever applied to register to vote. I guess that's not a red herring. I guess that's an official statement from the coordinator of elections office saying that they can't figure out if this fellow attempted to register or not. I didn't write that email. I didn't make him send it. I didn't have the very capable Ms. Summers send it for me. But that's what it stated. You read it. It was timely to the election. And we can keep going back over and over and over again about disenfranchising the voter. And we should never disenfranchise voters where it's all possible. But we also didn't have that fellow not fill out his application and turn it in a timely manner. We didn't have any of that happen. We just applied the law as it was, and the vote didn't count. They couldn't even prove that he had registered to vote. They could not prove he had registered to vote. He certainly hadn't registered to vote in Benton County, or gotten voted. But as far as what the, keep coming back to the commission, the election commission, I didn't make the laws either. He's the chief administrative officer over what the county election commission tells him to do. And we're not trying to throw the county election commission under the table, but when you bring up things that say that it'd almost be like me charging Mr. Goins for things that Secretary of State Hargett does. Mr. Goins is not Mr. Hargett's boss. He can't be held responsible for what Mr. Hargett does or doesn't do. We've been trying to get everything taken care of. And you can have all your nice COVID-19 plans. You can have the most meticulously written plan ever. But like the military people know, and I appreciate their service, a plan is only as good as the day of the battle. And we have people that don't show up. We have people that didn't want to work. We tried and tried and tried to get people in. You can believe that or not. I mean, it's all what you believe to be the truth. But the fact that we even had that election during this time is extraordinary. But, we'll listen to all that. I have affidavits. I didn't introduce them. I can here if you wish to have them, if it matters. I have a signed, sworn affidavits from each of the former commissioners for the the November of 2018 election and the August 2018 election, in which they state that everything that was done, they were provided with information from Mr. Ward in a timely fashion, and they decided as the Central Provisional Ballot Counting Board what to do with the matter. Now, if you want to see them, they're right here, every one of them. I have the originals with me as well. I also have, and I chose not to pass them around, but I will. If you want to see them, I've got evidence that we have people who are hired, and yes, they don't meet that standard that he came up with. That's an arbitrary standard as far as we're concerned. These people were identified as a Democrat selected representative. You saw that in the two that I've given you. I have this many more. You want to see them? Does this matter? Does anybody want to see them?
We'll put it in the record.
All right.
Okay.
And in all of them, they say that they were elected as, or selected as, the Democratic Party or the Republican Party selected me to represent its interests in a fair and impartial election. And to the best of their knowledge, the facts that they asserted are the truth. They were willing to sign affidavits. And that says a lot about all of these people. And we could have had more, but we agreed that we would limit our time on all that was there with them. And that's no problem. But you see that if we can get this many in that short of time, we can get a whole lot more in a longer period of time. One of the interesting things that was made, and I think it bears talking about, in the face of an email from a person who was there. Mr. Goins wasn't there. These two fine representatives of Mr. Goins' staff sitting beside him were not there. Summers was not there. I was not there. But a person who was there about the Mr. Griffey call, Steve Griffey, said she never heard anything about real estate business. She doesn't work for Mr. Ward anymore. She didn't have to turn this in. In fact, she was willing to do this on vacation. I asked if I could get to talk with her, and she said, absolutely. Mr. Ward was one of the best bosses I've ever had. And she said it didn't happen. So he can tell you all that was there. I asked if I could cross-examine any of the witnesses. I was told that the only way I could cross-examine any of the witnesses that they put out in their response, and they said there were two, not just one. I have the response if you want to see it. There were two, not one. The only way that I could cross-examine these people who had made allegations against my client was if I gave my client up to be cross-examined. Really? That doesn't make any sense. That doesn't sound like fair play. He didn't bring the allegations, they did. They should be questioned over it. But we go along to get along, I suppose. Sometimes maybe I'm too nice. You want to talk about statements that are made taken out of context. Mr. Goins, who apparently has investigated a great deal of this, said, and I quote just 1 second ago, Mr. Ward owns 1/2 of Benton County. 1/2 of Benton County. Mr. Ward, raise your right hand. I am no Republican state. Does he do some sort of firm testimony about giving this knowledge of the truth, all the truth? For the limited of one question only, I will ask, he can get one rebuttal.
Objection.
Yes.
Objection.
All right, well, I would almost say that you knew where it was going, that there is no...
May I state the basis for my objection? If he is going to testify, any comments that he makes should be open for cross-examination and full interrogation. It is highly inappropriate for an individual to take the stand and say, I'm only going to testify about X, Y, and Z.
Well, this isn't a court of law, I think that was pointed out. This is just a board. So we don't follow rules of civil procedure. So, but that's okay. It can be a court now and a board later and all this stuff. That's all fine. We withdraw the question. I object to your objection.
I will put a motion before the board that he not be allowed to testify on the limited issue unless...
Oh, we withdraw. We withdraw. No reason for being careful. We withdraw. But I think you already know that Mr. Ward probably doesn't own half Benton County. And so when Mr. Goins likes to point out that these facts are construed against Mr. Ward, but yet he makes a statement that is everybody understood it to be what it is. Every county in the state of Tennessee does it this way. We all know that they don't. That every county doesn't do it this way, but you know they like to make hay about it. Well, if you'll give me just one moment to confer with my client. So as I conclude, I'm going to go back to the fact that the provisional ballot of August said no declination could be found. There was no registration, no attempted voter registration that could be produced by the state. And I'll leave you with these final words. You should count the vote anyway. You should count the vote anyway. Mr. Goins doesn't have the power to cause that vote to be counted. Mr. Ward doesn't have the power to cause that vote to be counted. He legally advised him, if we want to use their words, he legally advised him. If it's sauce for the goose, it's sauce for the gander. Thank you for your time.
Sure. So I have a brief closing. I don't think this needs to take too long. I think the case is so strong, I don't even know if we need to go through more force on words. Yeah, that's good. So what does Mark Ward think about this process?
And I know because of what I'm hearing, I feel we're all everybody at the table. But in the past, I've been in this room. Here's what's looking and seeing my name. One of the most respected guys across the whole state. He was still getting his president of the He's a Vietnam veteran. And always been going through with his wife and cancer. And we're, to say, don't call him Hal.
this dirty work?
See why all of this started. If you can show me any thread of evidence, and by the way, I'm a retired police officer, so I understand the process. You show me any shred of evidence of wrongdoing at the election commission, then we'll talk. Otherwise, other than him, Mr. Platt, how many people come up against me? I understand. Why are they here? Sorry? Why are they here?
I'll tell you why, because they made it up to give these guys a few hours before this meeting. So there's no avenue to read through 30 or 20 pages of the state. They're not here to represent themselves. They give it to them to sway whether they're going to vote tonight or if they're going to vote tonight. It's just a bunch of bull.
Made it up. Bunch of bull. But the defense, other than one provisional ballot, was we admit it. It happened in Benton County. It's a joke to the administrator of Benton County when he cast doubt on the state election commission appointments. It's a joke when, and let's just look at November 2018. Let's just look at that one voter. You heard no defense of that one other than it's just too late. So what? Voter got disenfranchised. It's a joke. It's a joke. When he goes before the county election commission, a county commission, in his official capacity, and states opposition to an issue that would have been on the ballot had the county commission not rescinded the bond issue. It's a joke. When you don't timely process voter registrations, there's no time limit. It doesn't matter when you process them. It could be a month, it could be 3, it could be a year. No time limit. Except there is a time limit. Other counties and voters rely on efficient voter registration. Time removal of ineligible voters. And this ought to alert everyone and make everyone in Benton County a little uneasy about the election results in 2022. What we know is there's folks that should be purged this year, but because Mark Ward didn't follow the law, those folks aren't getting purged. And we're talking about hundreds of voters. Anderson County, a tie vote. West Tennessee, the state representative race was decided by less than, I think, 6 votes. It gets worse because we've got to postpone more. So basically, we know that because the law wasn't followed, and it's federal and state, there's real potential of ineligible voters that's on the rolls in Benton County. We know that it's not a joke. We ensure bipartisan, you must have bipartisan representation. I'm a Republican. Let me tell you, when I hear that it's only Republicans that's working in a local location, I remember just a few years ago when Republicans didn't have control. And I'd be livid as a Republican if I heard that the Democrats are doing the same thing. I don't know how long Republicans are going to keep control. Personally, as a Republican, I hope it's forever. But we may not. I'm talking 12 years ago, we were not in control. He didn't apprise the Benton County Election Commission. They admitted, apparently there's an affidavit that they have put on record that they are admitting they violated the law. They've admitted it. And the administrator didn't say, wait a second, we're not allowed to do this. We can't do it. And by the way, you know who had the knowledge that there was more than 100 ballots that came in through the mail? That'd be the administrator. The administrator has that because that's who knows those information. They know how many sent, they know how many received. On Friday, the Secretary of State received some calls from some Republicans from Benton County complaining about the need for this show cause hearing. Let me put this in a way that my Republican friends might understand it better. It's not a joke. Suppose investigative reporter Jane O'Keefe from Project Veritas investigated the presidential election in a Georgia county. And here were the findings. The chairman of the local Democrat Party recommended the majority election commissioners for the election commission of that Georgia county. The election commission then employed a relative by marriage of the chairman of the Democrat Party to be the election administrator. the election administrator hired the Democrat chairman's brother to be the assistant administrator of elections. The Democrat chairman, along with other Democrats, were selected as the machine techs who delivered the voting machines and picked the voting machines up at the polls, and were charged with making sure the voting machines worked properly. Some of the polling locations were staffed with only Democrat poll officials who had hundreds of unvoted paper ballots in their care. When the polls closed, only Democrat poll officials counted the votes at the polling location, and only Democrats transported the votes to the central office where 2 Democrat computer technicians added up the votes for the entire county. During the investigation, O'Keefe found out that the mail-in votes were not counted correctly, and voter rolls had not been properly maintained. There was a local referendum on the ballot that the local election administrator had spoke about it at the county election commission, at the county commission meeting. That referendum failed by 1 vote. Although nothing improper may have occurred and the election may have been above board, any Republican seeing James O'Keefe's story, they would share it on social media, they would be livid, and they would not trust the election results, nor should they. Ladies and gentlemen, that fact pattern is exactly what has been proven today. That's what happened in Benton County for the November presidential election, except the parties are different. No matter what party you are, this type of setup of the election process is not only unfair, it's not legal. For those reasons, I recommend Mark Ward's certification be revoked based on the overwhelming evidence presented here today that he has substantially failed to perform his duties. Thank you for your time and patience. Stay rest.
What a closing. I didn't realize we were introducing new evidence in closing. That's all right. This isn't a court of law. As we are looking at the matter, there was 2 parts to the interview that you heard. The video there that was played. I have the other part, and in it, it has that the election commissioners that were there said that they were contacted by individual members of the State Election Commission and told that if they did not do what they asked them to do, and that is to replace Dan Miller, that they would replace them with someone who would replace Dan Miller. Now, I can introduce that in if you want to. It's just going to cause embarrassment to members. But that's the other part of that you didn't hear. And if you think I don't have it, I'll set the computer up here, and we can all just look at it after it's over if it makes any difference. Does anybody want to do it? Anybody want to hear it?
If it's real, put it in the record.
Let's do it.
If it's real.
Actually, we put it in the record. This is the video that we referenced when we sent to. So this video is referenced in the.
But there are 2 parts to this. There are 2 parts to the video, and I have a part. Actually, I have the audio version of it, and that's the first part. That since he did it.
Put it in the record.
Well, if you've got the whole part, then play the very beginning, where they're talking about Dan Miller and he has an interview with the. You've got the whole part.
It's in the record. I'm not going to make people.
I think he just said he wants to see it.
No, I didn't say I wanted to see it.
Okay.
I wanted you to put it in the record if you had.
Well, you need to go look at it, and I think you would question why they don't play it. But anyway, I've got it there if you want. All five members said that, as I remember. Anyway, I also have, if you want the affidavits for, here, let's just put them into the record. These are the affidavits saying that the county election commission in November 18 and August 18 were apprised of everything that they had available, all the evidence that they had available to them at that time, and they chose not to count those provisional ballots that were being talked about. So the November ones had not been glossed over. They were properly dealt with under law by the body that is designed to deal with them. And if those voters were disenfranchised after they received the letter, there was a remedy in law that they could have exercised, and they didn't, and most don't. But that's okay too. So, as we consider the closing here, why do we have elections? It's to preserve our republic. Our system of open and fair elections is arguably one of our most significant accomplishments as a people in a country. It started with we the people in order to form a more perfect union. What an idea.
Despite our differences between our political party and any political party, we could agree on this issue that open and fair elections are a worthy endeavor that should be cherished and defended. Our state election commission should be revered as the protector and preserver of this grand idea, and I genuinely mean that. Sadly, though, your reputation across this state is suffering. You should know that there are numerous allegations of strong-arm tactics, replacing board members to get rid of an administrator. That's in that video if you want to watch the whole thing. And regrettably, the list goes from West Tennessee, Middle Tennessee, to East Tennessee. Today's hearing against Administrator Ward not only seems to confirm those allegations in the minds of many, I will give you that he may have made some of you mad. May have. But we who are in the government should not respond to people who make us mad as we might in the private sector. We who are in the government do not represent ourselves. We represent those words of old, a government of the people, by the people, for the people. We should use the standard of service above ourselves in our actions. I feel that we presented a good defense to these allegations. However, despite the many defenses presented, there's not one single claim or in the aggregate that rises to the standard of substantially, that's an interesting word, substantially fails to perform the duties of office. No real complaints made, no real issues addressed by the coordinator's office, no major amounts of reports turned back as deemed deficient. But now it's all coming to play from years and years and years ago. And so I urge you to vote not to remove Mr. Ward's certification. It's been a genuine pleasure to be here today before you. Thank you for your kind attention. I will say that if it matters, on a side note, Madam Chairman, I'd like to address that nothing to do with Mr. Ward. I have a sworn affidavit from Dana Ferguson, who is the chairman of the Benton County Democratic Party, and she is respectfully requesting that it be made known that the Democratic Party would like to put Cynthia Wheatley and Stanley Rowland forward as replacement members to those that we have not had in Benton County since the April meeting. So that's April, May, June, and now in July. I know there was some confusion over two that who work on it, but they have resigned, and we would like to have these two appointed from the Democratic, and I have an affidavit of such need. I'm sure Mr. Duffy will be happy to confirm that with Mrs. Ferguson if such is needed.
Madam Chair, I've had numerous conversations with individuals in Benton County. As a matter of fact, these are the stickers that reflect the number of conversations I've had with different members from Benton County, as well as a number of other individuals. I've spoken with Dana, and at this point in time, I am not comfortable moving forward with the names that she has presented.
You want that in the minutes?
Yes.
Madam Chair, thank you so much for the opportunity to present that. Thank you for your time here today, and I hope all of you have a most enjoyous rest of your day. Whenever that may be.
Thank you, Dr. Shannon. Okay, I think it's the proper, does anybody have a motion?
Madam Chairman, I want to thank everybody for their time here today. And as we've heard from both sides, I would make a motion to decertify Administrator of Elections Mark Ward based on information presented to us today.
Second.
I'm going to ask for a roll call.
Commissioner Barrett?
Aye.
Commissioner Duckett?
Aye.
Commissioner Eldridge?
Aye.
Commissioner McDonald? Commissioner Leland? Commissioner Yance? Chairman Piper? Wait a minute, we have coordinator update.
I think anything I would have to say could wait till July.
Okay. So our next meeting is July the 12th, here in this room at noon. We're adjourned. No. We are adjourned.
Since the meeting is adjourned, folks, what's happened today is travesty.
Yes, Mark, how much money have you made from Dominion Software stealing our votes? You're trying to do it in Benton County.
This lady over here has a direct conflict.
Yes, she does. Get paid from Benton County. You should not be voting on this. We got freedom of speech. We got freedom of speech. That's all right. I'm keeping on digging. Everybody will know what y'all get paid for. And who you get paid by.
He's gonna need a transfer, so give me just a second to get this permit. I need him to know what's not. Just, I'm writing another call. Do you have to speak to him now? Well, whatever it is. That's what they're doing. They're not supposed to rally around. They're supposed to go back to their car. Okay. Well, I don't know that we